Chapter 32 of Balsamo the Magician by Alexandre Dumas, translated by Henry L. Williams. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Nun's Husband. A deep silence long surrounded the two women, one in painful meditation, the other in astonishment, readily understood. "If you were removed out of the nunnery," said Lady Louise to break this silence, "you are unaware of how it was done? Yet a convent is well enclosed and guarded, with bars to the windows, walls of height, and a warder who keeps the keys. In Italy it is particularly so, where the regulations are stricter than in France." "What can I tell your ladyship, when I puzzle my brains without finding a clue?" "But if you saw this man, did you not blame him for the abduction?" "I did, but he excused himself on the plea that he loved me. I told him that he frightened me, and that I was sure that I did not like him. The strange feeling is another kind. I am not myself when he is by, but his. Whatever he wills, I must do. One look fascinates me and subdues me. You see, lady, this must be magic." "At least it is strange, if not supernatural," said the princess. "But you are in the company of this man?" "Yes, but I do not love him." "Then why not appeal to the authorities, your parents, the ecclesiastical powers?" "He so watched me that I could not move." "But you could have written." "On the road he stopped at houses where everything is owned by him, and he is master of everybody. When I asked the people about for writing materials, they gave no answer. They were his bondwomen." "But how did you travel?" "At first in a post-chaise, but at Milan he had a kind of house on wheels to continue the journey on." "Still, he must have left you alone sometimes." "Yes, but then he bade me sleep, and sleep I did, only waking up when he returned." "You could not have strongly wanted to get away," observed Princess Louise, shaking her head, "or else you would have managed it." "Alas, I was so fascinated." "By his loving speech and endearments?" "Seldom did he speak of love, and I remember me of no caresses save a kiss, night and morning." "Really, this is very strange," muttered the abbess, but as a suspicion struck her, she resumed, "Repeat to me that you do not love him, and that as no worldly tie unties you, he would have no claim on you if he came." "He has none." "But tell me how you came here through all, for I am in a fog," said the princess. "I took advantage of a violent thunderstorm, which broke on us near a town called Nancy, I believe. He left me to go into a part of his travelling house, which is inhabited by an old man. I leaped upon his horse and fled. My resolution was to hide in Paris, or some great city, where I could be lost to all eyes, especially to his. When I arrived here, all were talking of your highness's retirement into the Carmelite convent. All extolled your piety, solicitude for the unhappy, and compassion for the afflicted. This was a ray of heavenly light, showing me that you alone were generous enough to receive me and powerful enough to defend me." "You continually appeal to power, my child, as though he were powerful." "I am ignorant what he is. I only know that no king inspires more respect, no idol commands more adoration, than he from those to whom he deigns to reveal himself." "But his name? How is he entitled?" "I have heard him called by many names, but only two remain in my memory. One is used by the old man who is travelling companion from Milan to where I left him. The other that he gives himself. The aged man calls him Akarat, and that sounds anti-Christian, does it not, lady? He calls himself Joseph Balsamo." "What does he say of himself?" "He knows everything, and divines what he knew not. He is the contemporary of all time. He has lived through all ages. He speaks— the Lord forgive me, and forgive him for such blasphemy— not only of Alexander the Great, Caesar, and Charlemagne, as though he had known them, albeit I believe they were dead ever so long ago, but also of the high priest Caiaphas, Pontius Pilate, and our Lord himself, whose martyrdom he claims to have witnessed." "He is some quack," said the Princess Louise. "I do not clearly understand the word, madame, but he is a dangerous man, terrible too, before whom everything bends, snaps, and crumbles away. When he is taken to be defenceless, he is armed at all points. When believed alone, he stamps his foot and an army springs up, or at a beck of the finger, smiling the while." "Very well," soothed the daughter of France. "Take cheer, my child. You will be protected against him, so long as you desire the protection, of course. But do not believe any longer in these supernatural visions born of a sick brain. In any case, the walls of Saint Denis Abbey are a sure rampart against infernal power, and what is more to be dreaded, mark you, against human power. Now, what do you propose doing?" "With this property of mine, in jewels, I mean to pay for my repose in a convent, if possible in this one." Lorenza placed on the table some 20,000 crowns worth of bracelets, rings, and earrings of price. "These jewels are mine, as Balsamo gave them to me, and I shall turn them over to heaven's use. I have nothing of his but his steed Jared, which was the instrument of my deliverance, but I should like him to have it. So I solicit the favour of staying here, on my knees." "Rest easy, my child," said the Lady Superior. "From this time forth you may dwell among us, and when you shall have shown by your exemplary conduct that you deserve the favour, you may again be the bride of the Lord, and I will answer for it that you will not be removed out of Saint Denis without knowledge of the Superior." Lorenza fell at the princess's feet and poured forth the most affectionate and sincere thanks, but suddenly she rose on one knee and listened with trembling and pallor. "Oh, God, how I shake! He is coming. He means to be my destroyer. That man is at hand. Do you not see how my limbs quiver?" "I see this, indeed. Now I feel the stab in my heart," continued the Italian. "He comes nearer and nearer." "You are mistaken." No, no, in spite of myself, he draws me to him. Hold me back from him." Princess Louise seized the speaker in her arms. "Recover your senses, child," she said. "Even if anyone came, even he, you would be in safety here." "He approaches, I tell you, he approaches!" screamed Lorenza, terrified into inertia, but with her hands and her eyes directed toward the room door. "Madness!" said the abbess. "Do you think that anybody can intrude on the royal lady of France? None but the bearer of an order from the king." "I do not know how he entered," stammered the fugitive, recoiling, "but I am certain that he is coming up the stairs. He is not 10 steps off. There he is." The door flew open, so that the princess receded, frightened in spite of herself by the odd coincidence. But it was a nun who appeared. What do you want? Who is there?" cried her superior.
"Madame, it is a nobleman who presents himself to have speech with your Royal Highness."
"His title?"
"Count Phoenix, please your Highness."
"Do you know the name is his?" inquired the princess of the fugitive. "I do not know the name, but it is he," she replied.
"Charged with a mission to the King of France from the King of Prussia," said the nun. "He wishes the honor of a hearing by your Highness."
Princess Louise reflected an instant. Then, turning to Lorenza and bidding her go into her inner room, she ordered the sister to show in the visitor. She went and took her chair, waiting, not without emotion, for the sequel of the incident. Almost instantly reappearing, the Carmelite ushered in a man whom we have seen under the title of Phoenix, at the presentation of Jean du Barry at court. He was garbed in the same Prussian uniform of severe cut. He wore the military wig and the black stock. His expressive black eyes lowered in presence of Princess Louise, but only with the respect of any man for a princess of the royal house, whatever his rank. He raised them rapidly, as though he feared showing too much timidity. "I thank your Royal Highness for the favour kindly done to me," he said, "though I reckoned upon it from knowing that your Highness always upholds the unfortunate." "I endeavour so to do, my lord," replied the lady with dignity, for she hoped in 10 minutes to defeat the man who impudently came to claim outside help, to oppress where he had abused his powers. The count bowed as if he did not see any hidden meaning in the rejoinder. "What can I do for your lordship?" continued the lady, in the same tone of irony. "Everything. I should like your Highness to believe that I would not, without grave motives, vex you in the solitude she has chosen. But you have sheltered a person in whom I am interested in all points." "What is the name of this person?" "Lorenza Feliciani." "What is this person to you? A relative? Sister?" "She is my wife." "Lorenza Feliciani, wife of Count Phoenix," said the abbess, raising her voice so as to be heard in the inner room. "No Countess Phoenix is in Saint Denis Abbey," she dryly added. "It may be," said the count, who was not yet acknowledging his defeat, "that your Highness is not persuaded that Lorenza and Countess Phoenix are the same person. Kindly give the order that Lorenza shall be brought before you, and all doubt will cease. I ask pardon for being so persistent, but I am tenderly attached to this wife of mine, and I believe she is sorry we are separated, poor as is my merit." "Huh," thought the princess. "Lorenza spoke the truth, for this man is highly dangerous." The count stood with a calm bearing, strictly according to court etiquette. "I must prevaricate," thought Princess Louise before she said, "My lord, I am not in the position to restore a wife who is not here. I understand your seeking her with such persistency, if you love her as dearly as you say, but you will have to seek elsewhere if you want success." On entering, the count had glanced round the closet, and his gaze had caught a reflection, however slight, of the jewels placed by Lorenza on the little table in the darkest corner. By the sparkling, Phoenix recognized them. "If your Royal Highness would kindly collect your memory, though I have to ask her to do such violence, it will be recalled that Lorenza Feliciani was here, for she laid those jewels on yonder table before she retired into the next room." The princess coloured up as the count continued, "So that I wait solely for your Highness's leave for me to order her to come forth, for I cannot doubt that she will immediately obey." The abbess remembered that Lorenza had locked the door behind her, and consequently that she could not be prevailed upon except by her own will to come out. No longer trying to dissimulate her vexation at having been lying uselessly to this man, from whom nothing could be concealed, she said, "Were she to enter, what would be done to her?" "Nothing, your Highness. She will merely tell you that she wishes to go with her husband." This encouraged the princess, recalling the Italian woman's protests.
"It would seem that your highness does not believe me,"
said the count, in answer to her apparent indignation.
"Is there anything incredible in Count Phoenix marrying Lorenza Feliciani and claiming his wife? I can easily lay before your royal highness's eyes the marriage certificate, properly signed by the priest who performed the ceremony."
The princess started, for such calmness shook her conviction. He opened a portfolio and took out a twice-folded paper.
"This is the proof of my claim on my wife," he said. "The signature ought to carry belief. It is that of the curate of St. John's in Strasbourg, well known to Prince Louis of Rohan for one, and were his eminence the cardinal here—"
"He is here at this very time!" exclaimed the abbess, fastening fiery looks on the count. "His eminence has not left the abbey, where he is with the cathedral canons, so nothing is more easy than the verification you challenge."
"This is a great boon to me,"
said the count, coolly replacing the document in the pocket-book.
"I hope this verification will dispel your royal highness's unjust suspicions against me."
"Indeed, impudence does disgust me," said the princess, ringing her handbell quickly. The nun-in-waiting entered hastily. "Send my courier to carry this note to Cardinal Rohan, who is in the cathedral chapter. Let his eminence come hither as I await him." While speaking, she scribbled a couple of lines on paper, which she handed to the nun, whispering, "Post 2 archers of the royal guard in the corridor, and let not a soul issue without my leave. Go." The count had watched all the princess's preparations to fight out the battle with him. While she was writing, he approached the inner room, and he muttered some words while extending and working his hands in a movement more methodical than nervous, with his eyes fastened on the door. The princess, turning, caught him in the act.
"Madame,"
said the count,
"I am adjuring Lorenza Feliciani to come personally and confirm by her own words, and by her free will, whether I am or not a forger and an impostor, without prejudice to the other proofs your highness may exact. Lorenza!"
called out the count, rising above all, even to the princess's will.
"Come forth."
The key grated in the lock, and the princess beheld with unspeakable apprehension the coming of the Italian beauty. Her eyes were fixed on the count, with no show of hatred or anger. "What are you doing, child?" faltered the Lady Louise. "And why do you come to the man whom you shunned? I told you that you were in safety there."
"She is also in safety in my house, my lady," replied the nobleman. "Are you not in safety there, Lorenza?"
he demanded of the refugee. "Yes," was the other's answer. At the height of amazement, the princess clasped her hands and dropped into her chair.
"Lorenza,"
went on the count, in a soft voice but one with the accent of command,
"I am accused of doing you violence. Tell me if I have ever acted so towards you."
"Never," replied the woman in a clear and precise voice, but without any gesture accompanying the denial. "Then what did the story about the abduction mean?" questioned the princess. Lorenza remained dumb, but looking at the count as though all her life and speech, which is its expression, must come from him.
"Her highness doubtless wishes to know how you came to leave your nunnery. Relate what happened from your fainting in the choir until you awoke in our post-chaise."
"I remember," said Lorenza in the same monotonous voice.
"Speak, for I wish it."
"When I fainted, as the scissors touched my hair, I was carried into my cell and placed in bed. My mother stayed with me until evening, when the village doctor declared that I was dead." "How did you know this?" inquired the princess.
"Her highness wishes to know how you were aware of what went on," said the count.
"Strange thing,"
said Lorenza.
"I could see and hear, but without having my eyes open. I was in a trance." "In fact," said the abbess, "I have heard Dr. Tronchin speak of patients in catalepsy who were buried alive."
"Proceed, Lorenza."
"My mother was in despair, and would not believe in my death. She passed 36 hours beside me, without my making a move or uttering a sigh. The priest came 3 times, and told my mother that she was wrong to dispute the interment, as her daughter had passed away, just as she was speaking the vow, and that my soul had gone straight from the altar to heaven. But my mother insisted on watching all Monday night. Tuesday morning I was in the same insensibility, and my mother retired, vanquished. The nuns hooted her for the sacrilege. The death candles were lighted in the chapel, where the custom was for the exposure of the body to repose a day and a night. I was shrouded, dressed in white, as I had not taken the vow, my hands crossed on my bosom, and a wreath of white blossoms placed on my brow. When the coffin was brought in, I felt a shiver pass over my body, for, I repeat, I saw all that happened as though I were my second self, standing invisibly beside my counterpart. I was placed in the coffin, and after my time of lying in state, left with only the hospital sister to watch me. A dreadful thought tormented me in this lethargy, that I should be buried living on the morrow, unless some interposition came. Each stroke of the time bell echoed in my heart, for I was listening. Doleful idea, to my own death knell. Heaven alone knows what efforts I made to break the iron bonds which held me down on the bier, but it had pity on me in my frozen sleep, since here I am. Midnight rang. At the first stroke, I felt that convulsion experienced whenever Akarat approached me. A shock came to my heart. I saw him appear in the chapel doorway.
"Was it fright that you felt?"
asked Count Phoenix. No, it was joy, bliss, ecstasy, for I knew that he came to tear me from the desperate death which I so abhorred. Slowly he came up to my coffin. He smiled on me as he gazed for a moment, and he said, "Are you glad to live? Then come with me." All the bonds snapped at his call. I rose, extricated myself from the bier as from the grave clothes, and passed by the slumbering nun. I followed him, who for the second time had snatched me from death. Out in the courtyard I beheld the sky spangled with stars, which never more had I expected to see. I felt that cool night air, which blesses not the dead, but which is so refreshing to the living. "Now," said my liberator, "before quitting the convent, choose between it and me. Will you be a nun, or will you be my wife?" I wanted to be his wife, and I followed him. The tower gate was closed and locked. He asked where were the keys, and as I said, in the pocket of the wardress, who slept within, he sent me there to get them. 5 minutes after, we were in the street. I took his arm, and we ran to the end of Subiaco village. 100 paces beyond the last house, a post-chaise was waiting, all ready. We got in, and off it went at a gallop. "And no violence was done you? No threat was proffered? You followed the man willingly?"
Lorenza remained mute. "Her Royal Highness asks you, Lorenza, if by threat or act I forced you to follow me."
"No, I went because I loved you, darling."
With a triumphant smile, Count Phoenix turned round to the royal princess. End of chapter 32. Recording by jvanstan, Savannah, Georgia. Chapter 33 of Balsamo the Magician by Alexandre Dumas, translated by Henry L. Williams. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Count and Cardinal. What took place under the Princess Abbess's sight was so extraordinary that her mind,
strong and yet tender, questioned if she did not face a true magician who disposed of sentiments and wills as he liked. But Count Phoenix was not going to leave things thus.
As your Royal Highness has heard only part of the story from my wife's lips, doubts might linger if the rest was not spoken by them. Dear Lorenza,
he said, turning again to the Italian,
after leaving your country, we went on tour to the Alps and to the Rhine, the magnificent Tiber of the north.
Yes, Lorenza has seen these sights, said the woman. Lured by this man, led by a power resistless of which you spoke, my child, suggested the princess.
Why should your Highness believe this, when all you hear is to the contrary? I have a palpable proof in the letter my wife wrote me when I was obliged to leave her at Mainz. She sorrowed and longed for me, so that she wrote this note which your Highness may read.
She looked at the letter which the Count took out of the letter-case. Return, accurat, for all goes when you leave me. When shall I have you for eternity? Lorenza. With the flame of choler on her brow, the princess went up to the fugitive holding out this letter. The other allowed her to approach without seeming to see or hear any but the Count.
I understand,
said the latter, decided to clear up matters completely.
Your Highness doubts and wishes to be sure the writing is Lorenza's. She herself shall enlighten you. Lorenza, answer. Who wrote this note?
On his putting the paper in her hand, she pressed it to her heart. It was Lorenza, she said.
Lorenza knows what is in it?
Of course.
Well, then, tell the princess what it says, that she may not believe that I deceive her in asserting that you love me. I want you to tell her.
Appearing to make an effort, but without looking at the note, unfolding it or bringing it to her eyes, she read word for word what the princess had seen without speaking it aloud. This is hard to believe, said the superior, and I do not believe you, from what is supernatural and inexplicable in what happens.
It was this very letter which determined me to hurry on our wedding,
said Count Phoenix, without heeding the interruption.
I love Lorenza as much as she loves me. In our roaming life, accidents might happen. If I died, I wanted my property to be my dear one's. So, we were united when we reached Strasbourg.
But she told me that she was not your wife.
Lorenza,
said the Count without replying to the abbess, and turning to the Italian.
Do you remember where and when we were married?
Yes, in the St. John's Chapel of Strasbourg Cathedral, on the 3rd of May.
Did you oppose any resistance to the marriage?
No, I was only too happy.
The fact is, Lorenza, continued the Count, taking her hand, the princess thinks you were constrained to it.
I hate you? She said, shivering all over with delight. Oh, no, I love you. You are good, generous, and mighty. Seized with affright, the princess recoiled to where an ivory crucifix gleamed on a black velvet background.
Is this all your Highness wishes to know?
Asked Phoenix, letting Lorenza's hand fall. Keep away, gasped the abbess, and she too. A carriage was heard to stop before the nunnery door. The Cardinal? Exclaimed the Lady Superior. We shall see how things stand at last. Phoenix bowed, said a few words to the Italian woman, and waited with the calmness of one who directs events. In another instant, the door opened and Cardinal Rohan was announced. Show him in, said the abbess, encouraged by the new addition to the party being a churchman. The prince had no sooner saluted the princess than he exclaimed with surprise on seeing Balsamo. Are you here, my lord? Are you acquaintances? Cried the princess, more and more astonished. Then you can tell me who this is. Nothing is easier.
The gentleman is a magician."
"His Eminence will make this clear presently, and to everybody's satisfaction," said the Count.
"Has the gentleman been telling your Highness's fortune, that I see you so affected?"
questioned the Cardinal. "The marriage certificate at once!" cried the princess, to the astonishment of the newcomer, ignorant of the allusion.
"What is this?"
"My lord, the question is whether this paper is real and the signature valid," said the princess as Balsamo held out the document. Rohan read the paper as presented by the abbess and nodded.
"It is in proper form, and the signature is Curate Saint Remi's of St. John, Strasbourg, one of my appointees. But what does this matter to your Highness?"
"Considerable, but—"
"The signature might have been extorted."
"True, that is possible."
"How about Lorenzo's consent, then?"
said the Count sarcastically. "By what means could a priest have been induced?"
"By the magic in the gentleman's powers."
"Your Eminence is jesting?"
"Not at all, and the proof is that I want to have a serious explanation from this gentleman. Do not forget, my lord, that I shall do all the questioning,"
added the Cardinal with haughtiness.
"And remember that I was quite willing to answer aloud, even before Her Royal Highness, if your Eminence desired so, but I am certain you will not desire it."
The Cardinal had to smile.
"My lord," said he, "it is hard to play the wizard nowadays. I have seen you perform, and with great success, but everybody has not the patience, and still less the generosity of the Dauphiness."
"The Dauphiness?" queried Princess Louise.
"Yes, your Highness. I had the honor of presentation to her,"
said the Count. "But how did you repay the honor? Answer that, my lord."
"Alas, with more evil than I liked,"
said Phoenix.
"for I have no personal hate to men and less to women. My misfortune was that I was compelled to tell your august niece the truth she craved."
"A piece of truthfulness which caused her to faint."
"It is fault of mine,"
retorted the mesmerist, in that voice which he could sometimes make thunderous.
"That truth is so awful as to produce such effects. Did I seek out the princess and beg to be presented to her? No. I was avoiding her, when they almost dragged me before her, and she ordered me to answer her interrogation."
"But what was the dreadful truth you told her, my lord?" inquired the princess.
"She saw it in the gap which I tore in the veil over the future,"
rejoined the mysterious man.
"that future which has appeared so awful to your Royal Highness, that you have fled into a cloister to wrestle against it at the altar with tears and prayers. It is fault of mine, I say, if this future, revealed to you as a holy woman, should be shown to me as a precursor, and if the Dauphiness, alarmed at the fate personally threatening her, swooned when it loomed upon her."
"Do you hear this?"
said the Cardinal. "Woe is me!" moaned the Carmelite superior.
"For her reign is doomed, as the most fatal and unfortunate of the entire monarchy,"
continued the Count. "My lord!" cried the abbess.
"Perchance your prayers will earn your grace,"
proceeded the prophet.
"but then you will see nothing of what comes to pass, as you will rest in the arms of the angels. Pray, lady, continue to pray."
Overcome by this prophetic voice, which harmonized so well with the terrors in her soul, the princess dropped kneeling before the crucifix and began indeed to pray, and with fervor.
"Now, our turn, Cardinal,"
said the Count, turning to the prince and leading him into a window recess.
"Speak as to your want of me."
"I want to know what you are."
"You do know. You say that I am a magician."
"I mean that You are called Joseph Balsamo in the south, and here Count Phoenix?"
"That merely proves that I changed my name."
"Yes, but I would have you know that such changes on the part of such a man will set Chief of Police Sartina to thinking."
"This is petty warfare for a Rohan," said the other, smiling. "Your Eminence stoops to wrangle over words. Verba et voce, says the Latin. Is there nothing worse to fling at me?"
"You are railing, my lord?"
"Always. It is my style."
"Then I shall make you change your note, which will help me in the good graces of the Dauphiness, whom you have offended."
"Do so, as it will not be a useless act, considering the delicate ground on which you stand as regards her," returned Balsamo phlegmatically.
"What will you say if I have you arrested straightway, my lord the horoscopist?"
"You would do yourself injury, my lord Cardinal."
"Really? How do you make that out?"
demanded the proud peer with crushing scorn. "You would unmake yourself."
"At least we shall know who really is Baron Joseph Balsamo, alias Count Phoenix, a sprig of a family tree of which I have never seen the picture in any heraldic work in Europe."
"You should have asked to see it in the portfolio of the Duke of Breteuil, your friend."
"His Grace is no friend of mine."
"He was, and an intimate one, or your Eminence would never have written him that letter. But draw closer, my lord, lest we are overheard in what may compromise you. That letter, written from Vienna to Paris, to dissuade the Dauphin from making his marriage."
"That letter!"
gasped the prince, starting with fright.
"I know it by heart."
"Breteuil has betrayed, because he said it was burned when I asked it back, when the marriage was settled."
"He did not like to admit that he had lost it. A lost letter may be found, and indeed I found it in the marble court at Versailles. I took good care not to restore it to the Duke, for I knew your Eminence was ill-disposed toward me. If you were going through the woods and expected highwaymen to attack you, and you found a loaded pistol, would you not pick it up to use it? A man would be an idiot not to do so."
The cardinal felt giddy and leaned on the window-sill. After hesitation, during which the count watched the play of his features, he said,
"Granted thus. But it shall never be said that a prince of my line yielded to the threats of a mountebank. Though this letter may have been lost and found, and will be shown to the Dauphiness herself, and may ruin me as a politician, I will stand to it that I am still a loyal subject and a faithful ambassador. I will speak the truth, that I thought the alliance injurious to the interests of my country, and that it defend me or blame me."
"But what will be the answer of this faithful subject and loyal envoy, if somebody asserts that this gallant young beau of an ambassador, never doubting his winning all before him with his title of prince and name of Rohan, did not say this from any opinion that the alliance would be hurtful to his country, but because, being graciously welcomed by Marie Antoinette, this coxcomb of an envoy had the vanity to think the feast was fitter for Jack than his master?"
"He would deny it, for of this feeling which you pretend to have existed, no proof can be exhibited."
"You are wrong. The token is in the Dauphiness's coldness toward you."
The cardinal wavered.
"Believe me, prince," went on the count, "instead of quarreling as we have done, only for my having more prudence than you, we had better be friends, good ones, for such do one another service."
"Have I ever asked aught of your lordship?"
"Just there you are wrong. For you might have called on me during the 2 days you spent in town. You cannot conceal from a sorcerer what you have been about. You left the Austrian princess at Soissons. whence you rushed post-haste to Paris, where you dunned your friends for help, which they all refused you. This left you desperate.
What kind of help could I expect from you had I applied? Asked the Rohan, confounded.
Such as a man gives who can make gold, and you ought to want gold when you have to pay 500,000 francs in 48 hours. You want to know what good a man is who makes gold? Why, he is the very one where you will find the cash demanded. You could easily tell my house in St. Claude Street in the swamp, as the knocker is a brass griffin.
When could I call?
6. Tomorrow afternoon, please your eminence, and whenever after if you like. But we have finished our chat in time, for the princess has concluded her devotions.
The cardinal was conquered.
Your Highness, he said, I am forced to acknowledge that Count Phoenix is quite right. The document he produces is most reliable, and the explanations he has furnished have completely satisfied me.
Your Highness's orders?
Asked the count, bowing. Let me put one last question to this young lady. Again the count bowed in assent. Is it of your own free will that you quit the Abbey of Saint Denis, where you came to seek refuge?
Her Highness, repeated Phoenix quickly, asks you whether you are leaving this place of your own free will. Speak out, Lorenza.
I go of my own free will, replied the Italian.
In order to accompany Count Phoenix, your husband?
Prompted the magician. To accompany my husband. In this case, I retain neither of you, said the princess, for it would be running counter to my feelings. But if there be anything in all this out of the natural order of things, may the divine punishment fall on whomsoever disturbs the harmony of nature for his profit or interests. Go, my lord Count Phoenix, and you, Lorenzo Feliciani. I detain you no more, but take back your jewels.
They are for the poor, replied Balsamo. Distributed by your hands, the alms will be doubly agreeable to God. All I ask is to have my horse Jared.
Take him as you go forth. Be gone. Bowing to the speaker, the count presented his arm to Lorenza, who leaned upon it and walked out without a word. Alas, my lord Cardinal, sighed the abbess, sadly shaking her head, in the very air we breathe are fatal and incomprehensible things. End of chapter 33. Recording by jvanstan, Savannah, Georgia. Chapter 34, Balsamo the Magician by Alexandre Dumas, translated by Henry L. Williams. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Near Neighbors. On parting from young Tavernet, Gilbert had plunged into the crowd, but not with a heart bounding with glee and expectation. Rather, with the soul ulcerated by grief which the noble's kind welcome and obliging offers of assistance could not mollify. Andrea never suspected that she had been cruel to the youth. The fair and serene maiden was completely unaware that there could be any link between her and her foster brother, for joy or sorrow. She soared over earthly spheres, casting on them shine or shadow according to her being smiling or gloomy. This time it chanced that her shade of disdain had chilled Gilbert, as she had merely followed the impulse of her temper. She was ignorant that she had been scornful. But Gilbert, like a disarmed gladiator, had received the proud speech and the scorning looks straight in the heart. He was not enough of a philosopher yet not to console himself with despair while the wound was bleeding. Hence, he did not notice men or horses in the press. Gathering up his strength, he rushed into it at the risk of being crushed like a wild boar cutting through the pack of hounds. At length, breathing more freely, he reached the green sward, waterside, and loneliness. He had run to the river Seine, and had came out opposite St. Denis Island. Exhausted, not by bodily fatigue, but by spiritual anguish, he rolled on the grass and roared like a lion transfixed by a spear, as if the animal's voice better expressed his woes than human tongue. Was not all the vague and undecided hope which had flung a little light on the mad ideas, not to be accounted for to himself, now extinguished at a blow? To whatever step on the social ladder Gilbert might rise by dint of genius, science, and study, he would always be a man, or a thing, according to her own words, for which her father was wrong in paying any attention, and not worth her lowering her eyes upon. He had briefly fancied that, on seeing him in the capital and learning his resolution to struggle till he came up through the darkness, Andrea would applaud the effort. Not only had the cheer failed the brave boy, but he had met the haughty indifference always had for the dependent by the young lady of the manor. Furthermore, she had shown anger that he should have looked at her music book. Had he touched it, he did not doubt that he would be thought fit to be burned at the stake. As he writhed on the turf, he knew not whether he loved or hated his torturer. He suffered, and that was all. But as he was not capable of long patience, he sprang out of his prostration, decided to invent some energetic course. "Granted that she does not love me," he reasoned, "I must not hope that she never will. I had the right to expect from her the mild interest attached to those who wrestle with their misfortune. She did not understand what her brother saw. He thought that I might become a celebrity. Should it happen so, he would act fairly and let me have his sister, in reward of my earned glory, as he would have exchanged her for my native aristocracy had I been born his equal. But I shall always be plain Gilbert in her eyes, for she looks down in me upon what nothing can efface, gild, or cover my low birth, as though, supposing I attain my mark, it would not be greater of me than if I had started on her high level. Oh, mad creature, senseless being. Woman, your other name is imperfection. Do not be deluded by the splendid gaze, intelligent smile, and queenly port of Andrea de Tavernet, whose beauty makes her fit to rule society. She is but a rustic dame, straight-laced, limited, swathed in aristocratic prejudices. Equals for her are those empty-headed fops with effete minds, who had the means to learn everything and know nothing. They are the men to whom she pays heed. Gilbert is but a dog, less than a dog, for I believe she asked after Mahon and not about my welfare. She is ignorant that I am fit to cope with them. When I wear their like coats, I shall look as well, and that, with my inflexible determination, I shall grasp." A dreadful smile was defined on his lips, where the sentence died away unfinished. Frowning, he slowly lowered his head. What passed in that obscure soul? What terrible plan bent the pale forehead, already sallow with sleepless nights and furrowed by thinking? Who shall tell? At the close of half an hour's profound meditation, Gilbert rose, coldly determined. He went to the river, drank a long draught, and looked around, saw the distant waves of the people in a sea coming out of Saint-Denis. They so crowded in upon the first coaches that the horses had to go at a walk on the road to Saint-Ouen. The Dauphin wanted the ceremony to be a national family festival, so the French family abused the privilege. A number of Parisians climbed on the footboards and hung there without being disturbed. Very soon, Gilbert recognized the Tavernet carriage, with Philip holding in his capering horse by the side. "I must know where she goes," thought the lover, "and so shall follow them." It was intended that the Dauphiness should sup with the royal family in private at Muet, but Louis XV had broken the etiquette so far as to make up a large party. He handed a list of guests to the Dauphiness with a pencil, and suggested she should strike out the names of any not liked to come. When she came to the last name, Countess du Barry's, she felt her lips quiver and lose blood. But sustained by her mother's instructions, she summoned up her powers to her aid, and with a charming smile returned the paper and pencil to the king, saying that she was very happy to be let into the bosom of all his family at the very first. Gilbert knew nothing about this, and it was only when he got to Muette that he recognized the coach of Dubarry, with Amour mounted on a high white horse. Luckily it was dark, and Gilbert threw himself on the ground in a grove and waited. The king, then, shared supper between mistress and daughter-in-law, and was merry especially on seeing that the newcomer treated the usurper more kindly, even than at Compiègne. But the Dauphin, gloomy and careworn, spoke of having the headache and retired before they sat at table. The supper was prolonged to 11 o'clock. The king sent a band of music to play to the repast for the gentry of the retinue, of which our proud Andrea had to admit she was a member. As the accommodation was limited, 50 masters had to picnic on the lawn, served by men in royal livery. In the thicket, Gilbert lost nothing of this scene. Taking out a piece of bread, he ate along with the guests, while watching that those he attended to did not slip away. After the meal, the Dauphiness came out on the balcony to take leave of her hosts. Near her stood the king. Countess Dubarry kept out of sight in the back of the room, with that exquisite tact which even her enemies allowed she had. The courtiers passed under the balcony to salute the king, who named such of them to the Dauphiness as she did not already know. From time to time, some happy allusion or pleasant saying dropped from his lips to delight those who received it. Seeing this servility, Gilbert muttered to himself, "I am a touch above these slaves, for I would not crouch like that for all the gold in the world." He rose on one knee when the turn came for the Tavernets to pass. "Captain Tavernet," said the Dauphiness, "I grant you leave to conduct your father and sister to Paris." In the nightly silence, and amid the attention of those drinking in the august words, Gilbert caught the sound coming in his direction. "My lord Baron," continued the princess, "I have no accommodation yet for you among my household, so guard your daughter in town until I set up my establishment at Versailles. Keep me in mind, my dear young lady." The Baron passed on with son and daughter. Others came up for whom the princess had pretty stuff to say, but that little mattered to Gilbert. Gliding out of the covert, he followed the Baron among the 200 footmen shouting out their masters' names, 50 coachmen roaring out in answer to the lackeys, while 60 coaches rolled over the pavement like thunder. As Tavernet had a royal carriage, it waited for him aside from the common herd. He stepped in with Andrea and Philip, and the door closed after them. "Get on the box with the driver," said Philip to the footman. "He has been on his feet all day and must be worn out." The Baron grumbled some remonstrance not heard by Gilbert, but the lackey mounted beside the driver. Gilbert went nearer. At the time of starting, a trace got loose, and the driver had to alight to set it right.
"It is very late," said the Baron.
"I am dreadfully tired," sighed Andrea. "I hope we shall find a sleeping place somewhere."
"I expect so," replied her brother. "I sent Labrie and Nicole straight to Paris from Soissons. I gave him a letter to a friend for him to let us have a little house in the rear of his, where his mother and sister live when they come up from the country. It is not luxury, but it is comfortable. You do not want to make a show while you are waiting for the coming out in the suitable style."
"Anything will easily beat Tavernet," said the old lord.
"Unfortunately, yes," added the captain.
"Any garden?"
asked Andrea.
"Quite a little park for town, with fine trees.
However, you will not long enjoy it, as you will be presented as soon as the wedding is over."
"We are in a bright dream. Do not waken us. Did you give the coachman the address?"
"Yes, father," replied the young noble, while Gilbert greedily listened. He had hoped to catch the address. "Never mind," he muttered. "It is only a league to town. I will follow them." But the royal horses could go at a rattling gait when not kept in line with others. The trace being mended, the man mounted his box and drove off rapidly.
so rapidly that this reminded poor Gilbert of how he had fallen on the road near the hooves of John's post-horses. Making a spurt, he reached the untenanted footboard and hung on behind for an instant, but the thought struck him that he was in the menial's place behind Andrea's carriage, and he muttered, "No, it shall not be said that I did not fight it out to the last. My legs are tired, but not my arms." Seizing the edge of the footboard with both hands, the inflexible youth swung his feet up under the body of the coach so as to get them on the foresprings. Thus suspended, he was carried on, spite of the jerking, over the wretched rutty road. He stuck to the desperate situation by strength of arm, rather than capitulate with his conscience. "I shall learn her address," he thought. "It will be another wakeful night, but tomorrow I shall have repose, seated while I am copying music. I have a trifle of money, too, and I will take a little rest." He reflected that Paris was very large, and that he might be lost after seeing the Baron to his house. Happily, it was near midnight, and dawn came at 3:30. As he was pondering, he remarked that they crossed an open place, where stood an equestrian statue in the midst. "Victory's Place," he thought gleefully. "I know it." The vehicle turning partly round, and Andrea put her head out to see the statue. "The late king," explained her brother. "We are pretty nearly there now." They went down so steep a hill that Gilbert was nearly scraped off. "Here we are," cried the dragoon captain. Gilbert dropped and slipped out from beneath to hide behind a horse block on the other side. Young Tavernet got out first, rang at a house door-bell, and returned to receive Andrea in his arms. The Baron was the last out. "Are those rascals going to keep us out all night?" he snarled. At this the voices of Lebris and Nicole were heard, and a door opened. The three Tavernets were engulfed in a dark courtyard where the door closed upon them. The vehicle and attendants went their way to the royal stables. Nothing remarkable was apparent on the house, but the carriage lamps had flashed on the next doorway, which had a label, "This is the mansion of the Armenonville." Gilbert did not know what street it was as yet, but going to the far end, the same the carriage had gone out of, he was startled to see the public fountain at which he drank in the mornings. Going 10 paces up the street, he saw the baker's shop where he supplied himself. Still doubting, he returned to the corner. By the gleam of a swinging lamp, he could read on a white stone the name read 3 days before, when coming from Moidon Wood with Rousseau, Plastriere Street. It followed that Andrea was lodged 100 steps apart, nearer than she was to him at Tavernet. So he went to his own door, hoping that the latchet might not be drawn altogether within. It was pulled in, but it was frayed, and a few threads stuck out. He drew one and then another, so that the thong itself came forth at last. He lifted the latch and entered, for it was one of his lucky days. He groped up the stairs one by one, without making any noise, and finally touched the padlock on his own bedroom door, in which Rousseau had thoughtfully left the key. End of chapter 34. Recording by jvanstan, Savannah, Georgia. Chapter 35 of Balsamo the Magician by Alexandre Dumas, translated by Henry L. Williams. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Garden House. From coming home so late and dropping off to sleep so soon and heavily, Gilbert forgot to hang up the linen cloth which served as curtain to the garret window. The unintercepted sunbeam struck his eyes at 5 and speedily woke him. He rose, vexed at having overslept. Brought up in the country, he could tell exactly the time by the sun's inclination and the amount of heat it emitted. He hastened to consult this clock. The pallor of the dawn, scarcely clearing the high trees, set him at ease. He was rising too early, not too late. He made his ablutions at the skylight, thinking over what had happened overnight, and gladly baring his burning and burdened forehead to the fresh morning breeze. Then it came to his mind that Andrea was housed next door to Armenonville House, in an adjoining street. He wanted to distinguish this residence. The sight of shade trees reminded him of her question to her brother. Was there a garden where they were going? Why,
May it not be just such a house in the back garden as we have yonder? He asked himself. By a strange coincidence with his thought, a sound and a movement quite unusual drew his attention where it was turning. One of the long fastened-up windows of a house, built at the rear of the one on the other street, shook under a rough or clumsy hand. The frame gave way at the top, but it stuck, probably with damp swelling, at the bottom. A still rougher push started the two folds of the sash, which opened like a door, and the gap showed a girl, red with the exertion she had to make, and shaking her dusty hands. Gilbert uttered an outcry in astonishment, and quickly drew back, for this sleepy and yawning girl was Nicole. He could harbor no doubt now. Philip Tavernet had told his father that he had sent on Labrie and their maidservant to get a lodging ready in Paris. Hence, this was the one. This house in Coq-Héron Street, where the travelers had disappeared, was this with the extra building in the rear. Gilbert's withdrawal had been so marked that Nicole must have noticed it, only for her being absorbed in that idle fit seizing one just arisen. But he had retired swiftly, not to be caught by her while looking out of a garret window. Perhaps if he had lived on the first floor and his window had given a view within a richly furnished apartment, he would have called her attention on it. But the fifth flat still classed him among social inferiors, so that he wanted to keep in the background. Besides, it is always an advantage to see without being seen. Again, if Andrea saw him, might she not consider that enough to induce her to move away, or at least not to stroll about the garden? Alas, for Gilbert's conceit! It enlarged him in his own eyes. But what mattered Gilbert to the patrician, and what would make her move a step nearer or further from him? Was she not of the class of women who would come out from a bath with a peasant or a footman by, and not regard them as men? But Nicole was not of this degree, and she had to be avoided. But Gilbert did not keep away from the window. He returned to peep out at the corner. A second window, exactly beneath the other, opened also, and the white figure appearing there was Andreas. In a morning gown, she was stooping to look after her slipper fallen under a chair. In vain did Gilbert, every time he saw his beloved, make a vow to resist his passion within a rampart of hate. The same effect followed the cause. He was obliged to lean on the wall, with his heart throbbing as if to burst, and the blood boiling all over his body. As the arteries cooled gradually, he reflected. The main point was to spy without being seen. He took one of Madame Rousseau's old dresses off the clothesline, and fastened it with a pin on a string across his window, so that he might watch Andrea under the improvised screen. Andrea imitated Nicole in stretching her lovely arms, which by this extension parted the gown an instant. Then she leaned out to examine the neighboring grounds at her leisure. Her face expressed rare satisfaction, for while she seldom smiled on men, she made up for it by often smiling on things. On all sides, the rear house was shaded by fine trees. Rousseau's house attracted her gaze like all the other buildings, but no more. From her point, the upper part alone could be espied, but what concern had she in the servants' quarters in a house? Andrea therefore came to the conclusion that she was unseen and alone, with no curious or joking face of Parisians on the edge of this tranquil retreat, so dreaded by country ladies. Leaving her window wide open for the sunshine to flush the remotest corners, the young lady went to pull the bell rope at the fireplace side, and began to dress in the twilight. Nicole ran in, and opening the straps of a shagreen dressing-case dating from a previous reign, took a tortoise-shell comb and disentangled her mistress's tresses. Gilbert smothered a sigh. He could hardly be said to recognize the hair, for Andrea followed the fashion in powdering it, but he knew her 100 times fairer without the frippery than in the most pompous decorations. His mouth dried up, his fingers scorched with fever, and his eyes ceased to see from his staring too hard. Chance ruled that Andrea's gaze, idle as it was from her sitting still to have her hair brushed, fell on Rousseau's attic. Yes, keep on staring," uttered the youth, "but you will see nothing and I shall see all." But he was wrong.
for she descried the novel screen of the old dress which floated round the man's head as a kind of turban. She pointed out this odd curtain to her maid. Nicole stopped and pointed with a comb to the object to ask whether that were the reason for her mistress's amusement. Without his suspecting it, this had a fourth spectator. He suddenly felt a hasty hand snatch Madame Rousseau's dress from his brow, and he fell back thunderstricken at recognizing the master.
"What the deuce are you up to?"
queried the philosopher, with a frowning brow and a sour grin as he examined the gown. Nothing," stammered the other, trying to divert the intruder's sight from the window.
"Then why hide up in this dress?"
"The sun was too bright for me."
"The sun is at the back of us, and I think it is you who are too bright for me. You have very weak eyes, young man."
Rousseau walked straight up to the window. By a very natural feeling to be a veil to his beauty, Gilbert, who had shrunk away, now rushed in between.
"Bless me, the rear house is lived in now."
The tone froze the blood in Gilbert's veins, and he could not get out a word.
"And by people who know my house, for they are pointing up to it,"
added the suspicious author. Gilbert, fearful now that he was too forward, retreated. Neither the movement nor its cause escaped Rousseau, who saw that his employee trembled to be seen.
"No, you don't, young man,"
he said, grasping him by the wrist.
"There is some plot afoot, for they are pointing out your garret. Stand here, pray."
He placed him before the window in the uncovered glare. Gilbert would have had to struggle with his idol, and respect restrained him from thus being free.
"You know those women, and they know you," continued Rousseau. "Or why did you shrink from showing yourself?"
"Monsieur Rousseau, you have had secrets in your life. Pity for mine."
"Traitor!" cried the writer. "I know your sort of secret. You are the tool of my enemies, the Grimms and Holbachs. They taught you a part to captivate my benevolence, and sneaking into my house, you are betraying me. Threefold fool that I am, stupid lover of nature, to think I was helping one of my kind, and to nourish a spy."
"A spy?" repeated the other in revolt.
"When are you to deliver me to my murderers, O Judas?"
demanded Rousseau, draping himself in Therese's dress, which he had mechanically kept in hand, and looking droll when he fancied he was sublime with sorrow. "You calumniate me, sir," said Gilbert.
"Calumniate this little viper?" said the philosopher. "When I catch you corresponding in dumb show with my enemies, I dare say acquainting them in signs with my latest work."
"Had I come to steal your story, sir, I should better have made a copy of the manuscript lying on your desk than to convey it in signs." This was true, and Rousseau felt that he had made one of those blunders which escaped him in his moments of fear, and he became angry.
"I am sorry for you, but experience makes me stern," he said. "My life has passed amid deceit. I have been betrayed by everybody, denied, sold, and martyrized. You know I am one of those illustrious unfortunates whom governments outlaw. Under such circumstances, I may be allowed to be suspicious. As you are a suspicious character, you must take yourself out of this house."
Gilbert had not expected this conclusion. He was to be driven forth. He clenched his fists, and a flash in his eyes made Rousseau start. Gilbert reflected that in going he would lose the mild pleasure of seeing his loved one during the day, and lose Rousseau's affection. It was shame as well as misfortune.
Dropping from his fierce pride, he clasped his hands and implored, "Listen to me, if only one word."
"I am merciless," replied the author. "Man's injustice has made me more ferocious than a tiger. Go and join my enemies with whom you correspond. League yourself with them, which I do not hinder, but do all this beyond my domicile."
"Those young women are no enemies of yours. They are Mademoiselle Andrea of Tavernay, the young lady I told you of, on whose estate I was born, and her maid, Nicole. Excuse me, troubling you with such matters, but you drive me to it. This is the lady whom I love more than you ever loved all your flames. It is she whom I followed afoot, penniless and wanting bread, until I fell exhausted on the highway, and racked with pain. It is she whom I saw once more yesterday, at Saint Denis, and behind whose coach I came till I housed her in the place yonder. In short, it is she for whom I wish one of these days to be a great man, a Rousseau." His hearer knew the human heart, and the gamut of its exclamations. The best actor could hardly have Gilbert's tearful voice and the feverish gesture accompanying the effusion.
"So, this is your lady love?"
"My foster sister, yes."
"Then you lied a while ago when you said you knew her not. And you are a liar, if not a traitor."
"You are racking my heart, and you would hurt me less were you to slay me on the spot."
"Pooh! That is a mere piece of fustian out of the Diderot or Marmontel books. You are a liar, sir."
"Have it so. And the worse for you that you do not understand such white lies," retorted Gilbert. "I shall go, heartbroken, and you will have my despair on your conscience." Rousseau smoothed his chin and regarded the youth whose case had so much analogy with his own.
"He is either a great rogue or a lad with a big heart," he mused. "But, after all, if he is in a plot against me, it will be best to have the wires of the puppets in my hand."
Gilbert strode to the door, but he paused with his hand on the knob, waiting for the last word to recall or banish him.
"Enough on this head, my son," said the man of letters. "It is hard enough for you to be in love, to this degree, but it is getting on, and we have 30 pages of music to copy this day. Look alive, Gilbert, look alive."
Gilbert grasped the speaker's hand and pressed it to his lips as he would not a king's. While Gilbert leaned up against the door-jamb with emotion, Rousseau took a last peep out of the window. This was the moment when Andrea stood up to put on her dress, but seeing a person up at the attic window, she darted back and bade Nicole shut the sashes.
"My old head frightened her," mumbled the philosopher. "His youthful one would not have done that. Oh, youth, lovely youth!" And he broke forth singing, "Spring is the love time of the year, love is the springtime of life."
Hanging up the dress, he melancholically descended the stairs at the heels of Gilbert, for whose youth he would at that time have battered his reputation, at that juncture counterbalancing Voltaire's, and with it sharing the admiration of the entire world. End of chapter 35. Recording by jvanstan, Savannah, Georgia. Chapter 36 of Balsamo the Magician by Alexandre Dumas, translated by Henry L. Williams. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Balsamo at home. The house in St. Cloud Street, to which Joseph Balsamo invited the Cardinal Prince of Rohan, did not look strange in his day,
but it resembled a fortress to such an extent that it would be remarkable at present. Strongly built and with barred windows and grated doors, to say nothing of the ditch in front and high balconies, it was in keeping with this part of the town, pretty unsafe at this epoch after dark. There were scarcely a dozen houses on the quarter of a league to the Bastille, and the municipal authorities did not think it worth while to supply lamps. Along this deserted and unlighted highway, a carriage was driven after 9 one evening, which stopped at the low, deep doorway where gleamed the brazen griffin for a knocker which Count Phoenix had described. The arms of the nobleman were on the carriage panels. He preceded it by some yards, riding a Jared, who whisked his long tail till it whistled in the dust of the dirty pavement. Behind the closed blinds slumbered Lorenza on the cushions. At the rolling of the wheels, the door opened as by enchantment, and the carriage vanished in the black gulf of the mansion courtyard. There was no need of any mystery, for nobody was about to see the Count come home or mark what he brought, even if it were the treasure chest of St. Denis Abbey. A skillful calculator, given the size of the building lot and that of the house on street, would be surprised how so small a one covered so much ground. The fact of the matter was that there stood a house behind the outer house, known only to the tenant. A German servant, aged about 30, closed the coachway door and bolted it. Opening the coach door while the emotionless driver unharnessed the team, he drew from within the senseless Lorenza, whom he carried indoors to an antechamber. He laid her on a table and discreetly wrapped her in her long veil to the feet. He went out to light at the coach lamps a 7-candle chandelier, with which he came back. During that short space, Lorenza had disappeared. In fact, Count Phoenix had entered after the valet went out. He had taken up the girl in his arms, carried her out by a secret passage into a room furnished with trophies of outlandish weapons. With his foot he pressed the spring of the backplate of the high fireplace, which turned on well-oiled hinges, so that the Count could go forth as he did, while the secret panel slid to behind him. On the other side of the chimney was another flight of steps. Mounting a dozen, covered with Utrecht velvet carpet, he reached the sill of a room elegantly tapestried with satin, so wonderfully embroidered in high relief with flowers in their natural colors that they seemed real. The extremely rich furniture was of a boudoir and toilet chamber leading to a parlor. Curtains hid 2 windows, but as it was night, they were not wanted to give light. Lamps burning perfumed oil burnt here night and day, for the room had no external openings. They were drawn up through apertures in the ceiling by unseen hands when they needed replenishing. Not a sound penetrated here, and one might feel as 1,000 miles out of the world. But gilding flashed on all sides, and Bohemian glass mirrors sparkled. Dissatisfied with the light, after having placed Lorenza on a sofa, the Count struck a fire with the silver phosphorus matchbox, so startling to Gilbert, and kindled 2 pink-candled chandeliers on the mantelpiece. Returning to Lorenza, and kneeling with one knee on a pile of cushions beside her, he called her by name. Though her eyes remained closed, she rose on one elbow, but without replying. "Are you sleeping naturally, or through the magnetic spell?"
"Lorenza sleeps in the magnetic sleep," she replied.
"Then you can answer my questions. Look into the room of the Princess Louise, which we have just quitted, and tell me if the Cardinal of Rohan is there."
"No. The abbess is praying before going to rest."
"Look through the house for the Cardinal. Is his carriage at the door? Is it on the road? Come along nearer to Paris as we drove. Nearer."
"Ah, I see it. It has stopped at the toll bar. A footman gets down to speak with his master."
"Listen to him, Lorenza, for it is important that I should know what the Cardinal says to this man."
"You did not order me to listen in time, for he has done speaking to the man. But the man speaks to the coachman, who is told to drive to St. Claude Street in the swamp, by the Rampart Road."
Thank you, Lorenza.
The Count went to the wall, pulled aside an ornament which disclosed an ivory mouthpiece, and spoke some words in a tube of unknown length and direction. It was his way of corresponding here with his man of trust, Fritz.
"Are you content with me?"
asked the medium.
"Yes, dear Lorenza, and here is your reward,"
he said, giving her a fond caress.
"Oh, Joseph, how I love you,"
she said with an almost painful sigh. Her arms opened to enfold Balsamo on her heart. End of chapter 36. Recording by jvanstan, Savannah, Georgia. Chapter 37 of Balsamo the Magician by Alexandre Dumas, translated by Henry L. Williams. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The double existence. But he recoiled swiftly, and the arms came together ere falling folded on her bosom.
"Would you like to speak with your friend?"
he asked.
"Yes, speak to me often. I like to hear your voice."
"You have often told me, dearest, that you would be very happy if we could dwell together afar from the world."
"That would indeed be bliss."
"Well, I have realized your wish, darling. We are by ourselves in this parlor, where none can hear and none intrude."
"I am glad to hear it."
"Tell me how you like the place."
"Order me to see it."
"Does it please you?"
asked the Count after a pause.
"Yes, here are my favorite flowers. Thank you, my kind Joseph. How good you are."
"I do all I can to please you."
"Oh, you are 100 times kinder to me than I deserve."
"You confess that you have been wicked?"
"Very badly so. But you will overlook that."
"After you explain the enigma which I have struggled against ever since I knew you."
"Hearken, Balsamo. In me are two Lorenzas, quite distinct. One loves you, and the other detests you, as if I lived two existences, one during which I enjoy the delights of paradise, the other when I suffer the opposite."
"These two existences are your waking mood and your magnetic sleep?"
"Yes."
"Why do you hate me when in your waking senses, and love me when in the charmed sleep?"
"Because Lorenza is the superstitious Italian girl who believes that science is a crime and love a sin. Then she is afraid of the sage Balsamo and the loving Joseph. She has been told that to love would destroy her soul, and so she flees from the lover to the confines of the earth."
"But when Lorenza sleeps?"
"It is another matter. She is no longer a Roman girl and superstitious, but a woman. She sees that the genius of Balsamo dreams of sublime themes. She understands how pretty an object she is compared with him. She longs to live by him and die at his side, in order that the future shall breathe her name while it trumpets the glory of Cagliostro."
"Is that the name I am to be celebrated under?"
"The name."
"Dear Lorenza, so you like our new home?"
"It is richer than any you have found for me, but that is not why I like it more, but because you say you will be oftener here with me."
"So, when you sleep, you know how fondly I adore you?"
"Yes," she said with a faint smile. "I see that passion, then, and yet there is something you love about Lorenza." She sighed. "Your dream."
"Rather say my task."
Well, your ambition.
Say, my glory.
Oh, heaven!
And her heart was laboring. Her closed lids allowed tears to struggle out.
What is it you see?
Inquired Balsamo, astounded at the lucidity which frightened even him.
I see phantoms gliding about among the shadows. Some hold in their own hands their severed crowned heads, like Saint Denis in that abbey. And you stand in the heart of the battle, like a general in command. You seem to rule, and you are obeyed.
Does that not make you proud of me?
Inquired the other joyfully.
You are good enough not to care to be great. Besides, in looking for myself in this scene, I see nothing of me. Oh, I shall not be there.
She sighed.
I shall be in the grave.
You dead, my dearest Lorenza,
said Balsamo, frowning.
No, we shall live and love together.
No, you love me no more, or not enough.
Crowding upon his forehead, held between her hands a multitude of glowing kisses.
I have to reproach you for your coldness. Look now how you draw away from me as though you fled my fondlings. Oh, restore me to my maiden quietude in my nunnery of Subiaco, when the night was so calm in my cell. Return me those kisses which you sent on the wings of the wind, coming to me in my solitude like a gold-pinioned sylph, which melted on me in delight. Do not retreat from me. Give me your hand, that I may press it. Let me kiss your dear eyes. Let me be your wife, in short.
Lorenza, sweetest, you are my well-beloved wife.
Yet you pass by the chaste and solitary flower, and scorn the perfume? I am sure that I am nothing to you.
On the contrary, you are everything, my Lorenza, for it is you who give me strength, power, and genius. Without you I should be nothing. Cease, then, to love me with this insensate fever which wrecks the nights of your people, and love me as I love you. Thus I am happy.
You call that happiness?
Scornfully said the Italian.
Yes, for to be great is happiness.
She heaved a long sigh.
Oh, if you only knew the gladness in being able to read the hearts of man, and manipulate them with the strings of their own dominant passions.
Yes, I know that in this I serve your purpose.
It is not all. Your eyes read the sealed book of the future. You sweet dove, pure and guideless, you have taught me what I could not ascertain in 20 years' application. You enlighten my steps, before which my enemies multiply traps and snares. On my mind depend my life, fortune, and liberty. You dilate it, like the lynx's eye which sees in the dark. As your lovely orbs close on this world, they open in superhuman clarity. They watch for me. It is you who make me rich, free, and powerful.
And in return, you make me unhappy,
replied Lorenza, wrapped up in her frenzy. More fiery than ever, she enfolded him in her arms so that he was impregnated with a flame which he feebly resisted. But he made such an effort that he broke the living bondage.
Have pity, Lorenza,
he sued.
Was it to pity you that I left my native land, my name, my family, my faith?
She said, almost threatening, with her lovely arms rising white and yet muscular amid the waves of her long black tresses coming down.
Why have you laid on me this absolute empire, so that if I am your slave and have to give you my life and breath, Was it to mock me ever with the name of the Virgin Lorenza?"
Balsamo sighed, himself crushed by the weight of her immense despair.
"Alas, is it your fault or that of the Creator? Why were you made the angel with the infallible gaze by whose aid I should make this universe submit? Why is it that you are the one to read a soul through its bodily envelope as one may read a book through a glass? Because you are an angel of purity, Lorenza, and nothing throws a shadow upon your soul. In your radiant and immaculate bosom the divine spark may be enshrined, a place without sullying where it may fitly nestle. You are a seer because you are blameless, Lorenza. As a woman, you would be but so much substance."
"And you prefer this to my love?"
continued the Italian, clapping her hands with such rage that they became empurpled.
"You set my love beneath these whims that you pursue and fables that you invent. You snatch me out of the cold cloister, but in the bustling, ardent world you condemn me to the conventional chastity. Joseph, you commit a crime, I tell you."
"Do not blaspheme," said Balsamo, "for I suffer too. Read in my heart, and never again say that I love you not. I resist you because I want to raise you on the throne of the world."
"Ugh, your ambition!" sneered the young Roman. "Will your ambition ever give you what you might have in my love?"
He yielded to her, and his head rested in her arms.
"Ah, yes," she cried. "I see at last that you love me more than your ambition, than power, than your aspiration. Oh, you love me as I love you."
But at the touch of their lips, reason came to him who would be master of Europe. With his hands he beat aside the air charged with magnetic vapor.
"Lorenza, awake! I bid you!"
Thereupon, the chain which he could not break was relaxed, and the opening arms were dropped while the kiss died away on the paling lips of Lorenza, languishing in her last sigh. Her closed eyes parted their lids, the dilated pupils resumed their normal size. She shook herself with an effort and sank in lassitude, but awake on the sofa. Seated 3 paces from her, the mesmerist sighed deeply.
"Goodbye to the dream," he said. "Goodbye to happiness."
End of chapter 37. Recording by jvanstan, Savannah, Georgia. Chapter 38 of Balsamo the Magician by Alexandre Dumas, translated by Henry L. Williams. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Wakeful State. As soon as Lorenza's sight had recovered its power, she glanced rapidly around her. After examining everything without one of the many knick-knacks which delight woman brightening her brow, she stopped with her look upon Balsamo and nervously shuddered.
"You again,"
she said, receding. On her physiognomy appeared all the tokens of alarm. Her lips became white, and perspiration came as pearls at the root of her hair.
"Where am I?"
she asked, as he said nothing.
"As you know where you came from, you can readily guess where you are,"
he responded.
"You are right in reminding me. I do indeed remember. I know that I have been pursued by you, and torn from the arms of the royal intermediary whom I chose between heaven and you."
"Then you ought to know that this princess has been unable to defend you, however powerful she may be."
"You have overruled her by some witching violence,"
said Lorenza, wringing her hands.
"Oh, saints of mercy, deliver me from this demon."
"Where do you see anything demoniacal in me?"
returned Balsamo, shrugging his shoulders.
"Once for all, I beg you to lay aside this pack of puerile beliefs brought from Rome, and all the rubbish of absurd superstitions which you have carted about with you since you ran away from the nunnery."
"Oh, my dear nunnery! Who will restore me to my dear nunnery?"
cried the Italian, bursting into tears.
"Indeed, a nunnery is much to be deplored,"
said Balsamo. Lorenza ran to one of the windows, opened the curtains and then the sash, but came against iron bars which were there unmistakably. However, many flowers were masking them.
"If I must live in a prison," she said, "I prefer that whence one goes to heaven to that which has a trap-door into Hades."
And she began trying the bars with her dainty hands.
"Were you more reasonable, Lorenza, you would find only flowers at your window and not bars."
"Was I not reasonable when you confined me in that other prison, the one on wheels, with the vampire you call Atotis? But you still kept your eye on me when by, and never left me till you had breathed into me that spirit which possesses me, and I cannot shake it off. Where is that horrid old man who frightens me to death? In some corner, I suppose. Let us hush and listen till his ghostly voice be heard."
"You let your fancy sway you, like a child," said Balsamo. "My friend and preceptor, Altatus, my second father, is an inoffensive old man who has never seen you, let alone approached you, or if he did come near, he would not heed you, being absorbed in his work."
"His work? Tell me what the work is," muttered the Roman.
"He is seeking the elixir of long life, for which superior minds have been seeking these 2,000 years."
"What are you working for?"
"Human perfection."
"A pair of demons,"
said Lorenza, lifting her hands to heaven.
"Is this your fit coming on again? You are ignorant of one thing. Your life is divided into two parts. During one you are gentle, good, and sensible. During the other you are mad."
"And you shut me up under the vain pretext of this malady?"
"It had to be done."
"Oh, barbarian, be cruel without pity. Imprison me and kill me, but do not play the hypocrite and pretend to feel for me while you tear me to pieces."
"Do you call it torture to live in a luxurious suite of rooms?"
said Balsamo with a kindly smile and not at all disturbed.
"With bars to all the issues."
"Put there for the sake of your life, Lorenza."
"Oh, he roasts me to death at a slow fire, and he talks of my life's sake,"
exclaimed the Italian. Approaching, he offered to take her hand, but she repelled his as if it were a serpent.
"Do not touch me,"
she said.
"Do you hate me so much, Lorenza?"
"Ask the victim how he likes the executioner."
"It is because I do not want to be one that I restrict your liberty a little. Could you come and go as you like, who can tell what your folly might drive you to?"
"Wait till I am free some day, and see what I shall do."
"Lorenza, you are behaving badly toward the husband whom you chose. You are my wife."
"That was the work of Satan."
"Poor crazy creature,"
said the mesmerist, with a tender look.
"I am a daughter of Rome," continued she, "and some day I shall take revenge."
"Do you say that merely to frighten me?"
he asked, gently shaking his head.
No, I will do what I say."
"What are you saying? And you a Christian woman?"
exclaimed Balsamo with surprising authority in his voice.
"Is your creed, which bids you return good for evil, but a hypocrisy, that you pretend to follow it, and you boast of revenge, evil for good?"
"Oh,"
replied Lorenza, for an instant struck by the argument.
"It is duty, not revenge, to denounce society's enemies."
If you denounced me as a master in the black art, it would not be as an offender against society, but against heaven. Were I to defy heaven, which need but comprise me as one atom in the myriad slain by an earthquake or pestilence, but which takes no pains to punish me, why should weak men like myself undertake to punish me?
Heaven forgets, or tolerates, waiting for you to reform, said the Italian.
Meanwhile, said the other, smiling, you are advised to tolerate your husband, friend, and benefactor.
Husband? Oh, that I should have to endure your yoke!
Oh, what an impenetrable mystery,
muttered the magician, pursuing his thought rather than heeding the speaker.
Let us have done. Why do you take away my liberty?
Why, having bestowed it on me, would you take it back? Why flee from your protector? Why unceasingly threaten one who never threatens you with revelation of secrets which are not yours, and have aims beyond anything you can conceive?
Oh,
said Lorenza, without replying to the question.
The prisoner who yearns for freedom eventually obtains it, and your house bars will no more hold me than your wagon sides.
Happily for you, they are stout,
replied Balsamo with ominous tranquillity.
Heaven will send another such storm as befell us in Lorraine, and some thunderbolt will shatter them.
Take my advice to pray for nothing of the kind, Lorenza. Distrust these romantic transports. I speak to you as a friend. Listen to me.
Stunned at the height of her rebellion, Lorenza listened in spite of herself, from so much concentrated wrath being in his voice, and gloomy fire in his eye, while his white but powerful hand opened and shut so strangely, as he slowly and solemnly spoke. Mark this, my child, that I have tried to have this place fit for a queen, and with nothing lacking for your comfort. So calm your folly. Live here as you would do in your convent cell. You must become habituated to my presence. As I have great sorrows, I will confide in you. Dreadful disappointment, for which I will crave a smile. The kinder, more patient and attentive you are, the more of your bars I will remove, so that in some months, who knows how soon, you will become perhaps more free than I am, in the sense that you will not want to curtail my liberty.
No,
replied the Italian, unable to understand that firm resolution could be applied to such gentle words.
No more professions and falsehoods. You abducted me, so that I am my own property still. Restore me to heaven, if you will not let me be my own mistress. I have borne with your despotism so far from remembering that you saved me from the robbers, who would have ruined me, but this gratitude is much enfeebled. A few days more of this captivity against which I revolt, and I shall no longer feel obliged to you. A few more, and I shall perhaps believe you were in concert with those highwaymen.
So you honor me with a captaincy of brigands,
sneered Balsamo.
I do not know about that, but I noticed secret signs and peculiar words.
But,
replied the other, losing color,
you will never tell them, never to a living soul. You will bury them in the remotest place in your memory, so that they shall die there, smothered.
Just the other way,
retorted Lorenza, delighted as angry persons are at having found the antagonist's vulnerable point.
My memory shall piously preserve those words, which I will repeat over and over again when alone, and say aloud when the opening comes, as already I have done.
To whom?
To the Princess Royale.
Lorenza, mind this well,
said he, clenching his nails in his flesh to subdue his fury and check his rushing blood at the thought that his brothers were in danger through the woman whom he had selected to aid them all.
If you said them, never again will you do so. For the doors will be kept fastened, those bars pointed at the head, and those walls reared as high as Babel's.
I have already told you, Balsamo, that any soul wherein the love of liberty is reinforced by the hate of tyranny must escape from all prison houses.
Well and good. Try it, woman. But mark this well. You will only twice try it. For the first time I will punish you so severely that you will weep all the tears in your body. And for the second, I will strike you pitilessly that you will pour forth all the blood in your veins.
Help! Help! He is murdering me! Shrieked the woman at the last paroxysm of wrath, tearing her hair and rolling on the carpet. For an instant, Balsamo considered her with mingled rage and pity, the latter overcoming the other.
Come, Lorenza. Return to your senses and be calm. A day will come when you will be rewarded amply for what you have suffered, or fancy.
Imprisoned, screamed the Italian, and beaten.
These are times to try the mind. You are mad, but you shall be cured.
Better throw me into a madhouse at once. Shut me up in a real jail.
No. You have warned me what you would do against me.
Then, said the infuriate, let me have death straightway. Springing up with the suppleness and rapidity of the wild beast, she leaped to break her head against the wall, but Balsamo had merely to stretch out his hands toward her and utter a single word rather with his will than with his lips to stop her dead. She stopped, indeed, reeled and dropped sleep-stricken in the magnetizer's arms. The strange enchanter, who seemed to rule all the material part of the woman, though the mental portion baffled him, lifted up Lorenza in his arms and carried her to the couch. There he laid a long kiss on her lips, drew the curtains of bed and windows, and left her. A sweet and blessed sleep enveloped her like the cloak of a kind mother, wrapping the wilful child who has much suffered and wept. End of chapter 38. Recording by jvanstan, Savannah, Georgia. Chapter 39 of Balsamo the Magician by Alexandre Dumas, translated by Henry L. Williams. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The predicted visit. Lorenza was not mistaken. A carriage going through Saint Denis Gateway and following the street of the same name turned into the road leading out to the Bastille. As the clairvoyant had stated, this conveyance enclosed the Cardinal Prince of Rohan, Bishop of Strasbourg, whose impatience had caused him to anticipate the hour fixed for his visit to the magician in his cave of mystery. The coachman, who had been inured to obscurity, pitfalls, and dangers of some darksome streets by the prelate's love adventures, was not daunted the least when, after leaving the part of the way still populated and lighted, he had to take the black and lonesome Bastille Boulevard. The vehicle stopped at the corner of St. Claude Street, where it hid along the trees 20 paces off. Prince Rohan, in plain dress, glided up the street and rapped 3 times on the door, which he easily recognized from the indication the Count had afforded. Fritz's steps sounded in the passage, and he opened the door. "Is it here resides Count Phoenix?" inquired Rohan. "Yes, my lord, and he is at home." "Say, a visitor is here." "Shall I announce His Eminence Cardinal Prince de Rohan?" asked Fritz. The prince stood aghast, looking round him and at himself to see if anything about him in costume or surroundings betrayed his rank. No, he was alone and in civilian dress. "How do you know my name?" he inquired. "My lord just told me now that he expected your eminence." "Yes, but tomorrow or the day after." "Not so, please your highness, this evening." "Announce me anyway," said the prelate, putting a double louis gold piece in his hand. Fritz intimated that the visitor should follow him, and he walked briskly to the door of the antechamber, which a large chandelier with a dozen tapers illuminated. The visitor followed, surprised and meditative. "There must be some mistake, my friend,"
he said, pausing at the door.
"In which case I do not wish to disturb the Count. It is impossible he can expect me, as he could not know I was coming."
"As your Highness's Cardinal Prince Rohan, you are certainly expected by my lord."
Lighting the other candelabra, Fritz bowed and went out. 5 minutes elapsed, during which the prelate, the prey to singular emotion, scanned the elegant furniture of the room and the half-dozen paintings by masters on the tapestried walls. When the door opened, Count Phoenix appeared on the threshold.
"Good evening to your Highness,"
he simply said.
"I am told that you expected me,"
observed the visitor without replying to the welcome.
"Expected? This evening? Impossible!"
"I ask your pardon, but I was expecting your Highness," returned the host. "I may be doubted, seeing how paltry is my reception, but I have hardly got settled yet from being but a few days in town. I hope for your Eminence's excusing me."
"My visit expected? Who could have forewarned you?"
"Yourself, my lord. When you called your footman to the carriage door, did you not say to him, 'Drive to St. Claude Street and the Swamp by St. Denis Street and the Boulevard'? Words which he repeated to the driver."
"Yes, but how could you see this and hear the words, not being present?"
"I was not there, but I saw and heard at this distance, as I am, you must not forget, a wizard."
"I had forgotten. By the way, am I to entitle you Baron Balsamo or Count Phoenix?"
"In my own house I have no title. I am plainly the master."
"Ah, the title in alchemy. So, my master in hermetics, if you expected me, the fire would be lit in the laboratory."
"The fire is always kept burning, my lord, and I will have the honor to show your Highness into the place."
"I follow you on the condition that you do not personally confront me with the devil. I am dreadfully afraid of his satanic majesty, Lucifer."
"My lord, my familiar friends," replied Balsamo, "never forget how to deal with princes, and they will behave properly."
"This encourages me. So, ho, for the laboratory!"
End of chapter 39, recording by jvanstan, Savannah, Georgia. Chapter 40 of Balsamo the Magician by Alexandre Dumas, translated by Henry L. Williams. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Art of Making Gold. The two-threaded and narrow staircase which led, as did the grand stairs, to the first-floor rooms. But a door was under an archway there, which the guide opened, and the cardinal bravely walked into a dark corridor thus disclosed. Balsamo shut the door, and the sound of the closing made the visitor look back with some emotion.
"We have arrived," said the leader. "Only one door to open and shut behind us. Do not be astonished at the noise it makes, as it is of iron."
It was fortunate that the cardinal was warned in time, for the snap of the handle and the grinding of the hinges might make nerves more susceptible than his to vibrate. They went down 3 steps, and entered a large cell with rafters overhead, a huge lamp with shade, many books, and a number of chemical and physical instruments. Such was the aspect. In a few seconds the cardinal felt a difficulty in breathing.
"What does this mean, my lord?"
he asked.
"The water is streaming off me, and I am stifling. What sound is that, master?"
"This is the cause,"
answered the host, pulling aside a large curtain of asbestos and uncovering a large brick furnace in the center of which glared 2 fiery cavities like lions' eyes in the gloom. This furnace stood in an inner room centrally, twice the size of the first, unseen from the stone cloth screen.
"This is rather alarming, meseems," said the prince.
"Only a furnace, my lord."
"But there are different kinds of furnaces. This one strikes me as diabolical, and the smell is not pleasant. What devil's broth are you cooking?"
"What your eminence wants. I believe you will accept a sample of my produce. I was not going to work until tomorrow, but as your eminence changed his mind, I lit the fire as soon as I saw you on the road hither. I made the mixture so that the furnace is boiling, and you can have your gold in about 10 minutes. Let me open the ventilator to let in some air."
"What? Are these crucibles on the fire?"
"In 10 minutes they will pour you out the gold as pure as from any assayers in Christendom."
"I should like to look at them."
"Of course you can, but you must take the indispensable precaution of putting on this asbestos mask with glass eyes, or the ardent fire will scorch your sight."
"Have a care indeed. I prize my eyes, and would not give them for the 100,000 crowns you promise me."
"So I thought, and your lordship's eyes are good and bright."
The compliment did not displease the prince, who was proud of his personal advantages.
He chuckled. "So we are going to see gold made."
"I expect so, my lord."
100,000 crowns worth?"
"There may be a little more, as I mixed up liberally the raw stuff."
"You are certainly a generous magician,"
said the prince, fastening the fireproof mask on while his heart throbbed gladly.
"Less than your eminence, though it is kind to praise me for generosity of which you are a good judge. Will your highness stand a little one side while I lift off the crucible covers?"
He had put on a stone cloth shirt, and seizing iron pincers, he lifted off an iron cover. This allowed one to see 4 similar melting pots, each containing a fluid mass, one vermilion red, others lighter, but all ruddy.
"Is that gold?"
queried the prelate in an undertone, as if afraid by loud speaking to injure the mystery in progress.
"Yes. The 4 crucibles contain the metal in different stages of production, some having been on 11 hours, some 12. The mixture is to be thrown into the first mass of ingredients, the living stuff into the gross, at the moment of boiling. That is the secret which I do not mind communicating to a friend of the science. But, as your eminence may notice, the first crucible is turning white hot. It is time to draw the charge. Will you please stand well back, my lord?"
Rohan obeyed with the same punctuality as a soldier obeying his captain. Dropping the iron pincers, which had already heated to redness, the other ran up to the furnace, a carriage on wheels of the same level, the top being an iron block in which were set 8 molds of round shape and the same capacity.
"This is the mold in which I cast the ingots,"
explained the alchemist. On the floor he spread a lot of wet oakum wads to prevent the splashing of the metal setting the floor afire. He placed himself between the molds and the furnace, opened a large book from which he read an incantation, and said, as he caught up long tongs in his hand to clutch the crucible,
"The gold will be splendid, my lord, of the first quality."
"Oh, you are never going to lift that mass single-handed!"
exclaimed the spectator.
"Though it weighs 50 pounds, yes, my lord, but do not fear, for few metal melters have my strength and skill."
"But if the crucible were to burst?"
"That did happen once to me. It was in 1399, while I was experimenting with Nicolas Flamel in his house by St. Jacques in the Shambles. Poor Nick almost lost his life, and I lost 27 marks worth of a substance more precious than gold."
"What the deuce are you telling me? That you were pursuing the great work in 1399 with Nicolas Flamel?"
"Yes, Flamel and I found the way while together 50 or 60 years before, working with Pietro the Good in Pelatown. He did not pour out the crucible quickly enough, and I had a bad eye, the left one, for 10 or 12 years from the steam. Of course, you know Pietro's book, the famous Margarita Pretiosa, dated 1330.
"To be sure. And you knew Flamel and Peter the Good?"
"I was the pupil of one and the master of the other."
While the alarmed prelate wondered whether this might not be the Prince of Darkness himself and not one of his imps by his side, Balsamo plunged his tongs into the incandescence. It was a sure and rapid seizure. He nipped the crucible 4 inches beneath the rim, testing the grip by lifting it just a couple of inches. Then, by a vigorous effort straining his muscles, he raised the frightful pot from the scorching bed. The tongs reddened almost up to the grasp. On the superheated surface, white streaks ran like lightning in a sulphurous cloud. The pot edges deepened into brick red, then browner, while its conical shape appeared rosy and silvery in the twilight of the recesses. Finally, the molten metal could be spied, forming a violent cream on the top with golden shivers, which hissed out of the lips of the container and leaped flaming into the black mold. At its orifice reappeared the gold, spouting up furious and fuming, as if insulted by the vile metal which had confined it.
"Number 2,
said Balsamo, passing to the second mold, which he filled with the same skill and strength. Perspiration streamed from the founder, while the beholder crossed himself in the shadow. It was truly a picture of wild and majestic horror. Illumined by the yellow gleams of the metallic flame, the operator resembled the condemned souls writhing in the infernos of Dante and Michelangelo in their cauldrons. Add to this the sensation of what was in progress being unheard of. Balsamo did not stop to take breath between the 2 drawings of the charges, for time pressed.
"There is little loss,"
observed he, after filling the second mold.
"I let the boiling go on the 100th of a minute too long."
"The 100th of a minute!"
repeated the cardinal, not trying to conceal his stupefaction.
"Trifles are enormous in the hermetical art,"
replied the magician simply.
"But, anyway, here are 2 crucibles empty and 2 ingots cast, and they amount to 100 weight of fine gold."
Seizing the first mold with the powerful tongs, he threw it into a tub of water which seethed and steamed for a long time. At length he opened it and drew out an ingot of purest gold in the shape of a sugar loaf, flattened at both ends.
"We shall have to wait nearly an hour for the other 2, said Balsamo. "While waiting, would your eminence not like to sit down and breathe the fresh air?"
"And this is gold,"
said the cardinal without replying, which made the hearer smile, for he had firm hold of him now.
"Does your eminence doubt?"
"Science has so many times been deceived."
"You are not speaking your mind wholly,"
said Balsamo.
"You suppose that I cheat you, but do so with full knowledge. My lord, I should look very small to myself if I acted thus, for my ambition would then be restricted to the walls of this foundry, whence you would go forth to give the rest of your admiration to the first juggler at the street corner. Come, come, honor me better, my prince, and take it that I would cheat you more skillfully, and with a higher aim, if cheating was intended by me. At all events, your eminence knows how to test gold."
"By the touchstone, of course."
"Has not my lord made the application of the lunar caustic to the Spanish gold coins, much liked at card play on account of the gold being the finest, but among which a lot of counterfeits have got afloat?"
"This indeed has happened me."
"Well, here is acid, and a blue stone, my lord."
"No, I am convinced."
"My lord, do the pleasure of ascertaining that this is not only gold, but gold without alloy."
The doubter seemed averse to giving this proof of unbelief, and yet it was clear that he was not convinced. Balsamo himself tested the ingots and showed the results to his guest.
28 carats fine," he said. "I am going to turn out the other twain."
10 minutes subsequently, the 200,000 crowns worth of the precious metal was lying on the damp oakum bed in 4 ingots altogether.
"I saw your eminence coming in a carriage, so I presume it is in waiting. Let it be driven up to my door, and I will have my man put the bullion in it."
100,000 crowns,"
muttered the prince, taking off the mask in order to gloat on the metal at his feet.
"As you saw it made, you can freely say so,"
added the conjurer.
"But do not make a town talk of it, for wizards are not liked in France. If I were making theories instead of solid metal, it would be a different matter."
"Then what can I do for you?"
questioned the prince, with difficulty hoisting one of the 50-pound lumps in his delicate hands. The other looked hard at him and burst into laughter without any respect.
"What is there laughable in the offer I make you?"
asked the cardinal.
"Why, your lordship offers me his services, and it seems more to the purpose that I should offer mine."
"You oblige me,"
he said with a clouding brow,
"and that I am eager to acknowledge, but if my gratitude ought to be rated higher than I appraise it, I will not accept the service. Thank heaven there are still enough usurers in Paris for me to find the 100,000 crowns in a day, half of my note of hand, half on security. My episcopal ring alone is worth 40,000 livres."
Holding out his white hand, white as a woman's, a diamond flashed on the ring finger as large as a hickory nut.
"Prince, you cannot possibly have held the idea for an instant that I meant to insult you. It is strange that truth seems to have this effect on all princes,"
he added as to himself.
"Your eminence offers me his services. I ask you yourself, of what nature can they be?"
"My credit at court, to begin with."
"My lord, you know that is shaky, and I would rather have the Duke of Choiseul's, albeit he may not be the prime minister for yet a fortnight. Against your credit, look at my cash, the pure, bright gold. Every time your eminence wants some, advise me overnight or the same morning, and I will conform to his desire. And with gold one obtains everything. Eh, my lord?"
"Nay, not everything,"
muttered the prince, falling from the perch of patronage and not even seeking to regain it.
"Quite right. I forgot that your eminence seeks something else than gold, a more precious boon than all earthly gifts. But that does not come within the scope of science, as in the range of magic. Say the word, my lord, and the alchemist will become a magician, to serve you."
"Thank you. I need nothing and desire no longer,"
sighed the prelate.
"My lord,"
sighed the tempter, drawing nearer,
"such a reply ought not to be made to a wizard by a prince, young, fiery, handsome, rich, and bearing the name of Rohan, because the wizard reads hearts and knows to the contrary."
"I wish for nothing,"
repeated the high nobleman, almost frightened.
"On the contrary, I thought that your eminence entertained desires which he shrank from naming to himself, as they are truly royal."
"I believe you are alluding to some words that you used in the Princess Royal's rooms," said the prince, starting. "You were in error then, and are so still."
"Your highness is forgetting that I see as clearly in your heart what is going on now as I saw your carriage coming from the Carmelite convent, traversing the town and stopping under the trees 50 paces off from my house."
"Then explain. What is there?"
"My lord, the princes of your house have always hungered for a great and hazardous love affair."
"I do not know what you mean, my lord,"
faltered the prince.
"Nay, you understand to a T. I might have touched several chords in you, but why the useless? I went straight to the heartstring which sounds loudest, and is vibrating deeply, I am sure."
With a final effort of mistrust, the cardinal raised his head and interrogated the other's clear and sure gaze. The latter smiled with such superiority that the cardinal lowered his eyes.
"Oh, you are right not to meet my glance, my lord. for then I see into your heart too clearly. It is a mirror which retains the image which it has reflected."
"Silence, Count Phoenix! Do be silent!" said the prelate, subjugated.
"Silence? You are right, for the time has not come to parade such a passion."
"Not yet? May it expect a future?"
"Why not?"
"And can you tell me whether this is not a mad passion, as I have thought, and must think until I have a proof to the opposite?"
"You ask too much, my lord. I cannot say anything until I am in contact with some portion of the love-inspirer's self. For instance, a tress of her golden hair, however scanty."
"Verily, you are a deep man. You truly say you can read into hearts as I, in my prayer book."
"Almost the very words your ancestor used. I mean, Chevalier Louis Rohan, when I bade farewell to him on the execution stage in the Bastille, which he had ascended so courageously."
"He said that you were deep?"
"And that I read hearts, for I had forewarned him that Chevalier Perrault would betray him. He would not believe me, and he was betrayed."
"What a singular connection you make between my ancestor and me," said the cardinal, turning pale against his wish.
"Only to show that you ought to be wary in procuring the lock to be cut from under a crown."
"No matter whence it comes, you shall have it."
"Very well. Here is your gold. I hope you no longer doubt that it is gold."
"Give me pen and paper to write the receipt for this generous loan."
"What do I want a receipt from your lordship for?"
"My dear Count, I often borrow, but I never fail to write a receipt," rejoined the prince.
"Have it in your own way, my lord."
The cardinal took a quill and scrawled in large and illegible writing a signature under a line or two which a schoolboy would be ashamed of at present.
"Will that do?"
he inquired, handing it to Balsamo, who put it in his pocket without looking at it.
"Perfectly," he said.
"You have not read it?"
"I have the word of a Rohan, and that is better than a bond."
"Count Phoenix, you are truly a noble man, and I cannot make you beholden to me. I am glad to be your debtor."
Balsamo bowed and rang a bell, to which Fritz responded. Saying a few words in German to him, the servant wrapped up the ingots of gold in their wads of rope yarn, and took them all up as a boy might as many oranges in a handkerchief, a little strained, but not hampered or bent under the weight.
"Have we a Hercules here?" questioned the cardinal.
"He is rather lusty, my lord,"
answered the necromancer.
"but I must own that, since he has been in my employment, I make him drink 3 drops every morning of an elixir which my learned friend Dr. Altatus compounded. It is beginning to do him good. In a year he will be able to carry 100 weight on each finger."
"Marvelous! Incomprehensible!" declared the prince-priest. "Oh, I cannot resist the temptation to tell everybody about this."
"Do so, my lord," replied the host, laughing, "but do not forget that it is tantamount to pledging yourself to put out the match when they start the fire, going to burn me in public."
Having escorted his illustrious caller to the outer door, he took his leave with a respectful bow.
"But I do not see your man," said the visitor.
"He went to carry the gold to your carriage at the 4th tree on the right round the corner on the main street. That is what I told him in German, my lord."
The cardinal lifted his hands in wonder and disappeared in the shadows. Balsamo waited until Fritz returned, when he went back to the private inner house, fastening all the doors. End of chapter 40. Recording by John Van Stan, Savannah, Georgia. Chapter 41 of Balsamo the Magician by Alexandre Dumas, translated by Henry L. Williams. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The Water of Life. He went to listen at Lorenza's door, where she was sleeping evenly and sweetly. He opened a panel and looked in upon her, for some while in affectionate reverie. Closing the wicket, he stole away to his laboratory, where he put out the fire by opening a register plate which sent most of the heat up the chimney and ran in water from a tank without. In a pocket-book, he carefully fastened up the receipt of Cardinal Rohan, saying, "The parole of a Rohan is all very well, but only for me, and the brothers will want to know yonder how I employ their money." These words were dying on his lips when 3 sharp raps on the ceiling made him lift his head. "Altatus wants me, and in a hurry. That is a good sign." With a long iron rod he rapped in answer. He put away the tools, and by means of an iron ring in a trap overhead, which was the floor of a dumbwaiter, as then they called elevators, he pulled this down to his feet. Placing himself in the center of it, he was carried gently, by no spring, but a simple hydraulic machine, worked by the reservoir which had extinguished the fire, up to the study reserved for the old alchemist. This new dwelling was 8 feet by 9 in height, and 16 in length. All the light came from a skylight, as the 4 walls were without inlet. It was, relatively to the house on wheels, a palace. The old man was sitting in his easy chair on casters, at the middle of a horseshoe-shaped table in iron, with a marble top, laden with a quantity of plants, books, tools, bottles, and papers, traced with cabalistic signs. Chaos. He was so wrapped in thought that he was not disturbed by the entrance. A globe of crystal hung over his yellow and bald plate. In this a sort of serpent, fine and coiled like a spring, seemed to curl, and it sent forth a bright and unvarying light, without other apparent source of luminous supply than the chain supporting the globe might contain to transmit. He was candling a phial of ground glass in his fingers, as a good wife tries eggs. "Well, anything new?" said Balsamo, after having silently watched him for a while.
Yes, I am delighted, Akarat, for I have found what I sought."
"Gold? Diamonds?"
"Pooh, they are pretty discoveries for my soul to rejoice over."
"I suppose you mean your elixir in that case."
"Yes, my boy, my elixir, life everlasting."
"Oh, so you are still harping on that string,"
said the younger sage sadly, for he thought his senior was following an idle dream. But without listening, Altatus was lovingly peering into his phial.
"The proportions are found at last," he mumbled. "Elixir of Aristeus, 20 grams, balm of mercury, 15, precipitate of gold, 15, essence of Lebanon cedar, 25 grams.
"But it seems to me, bar the Aristean elixir, this is about what you last mixed up."
"That is so, but there was lacking the binding ingredient, without which the rest are no good."
"Can one procure it?"
"Certainly. It is 3 drops of a child's arterial blood."
"And have you the child?"
gasped Balsamo, horrified.
"No, I expect you to find one for me."
"Master, you are mad."
"In what respect?"
asked the emotionless old man, licking with his tongue the stopper of the phial from which a little of the nectar had oozed.
"The child would be killed."
"What of it? The finer the child,
the better the heart's blood." "It cannot be. Children are no longer butchered, but brought up with care."
"Indeed. How fickle is the world. 3 years ago, we were offered more children than we knew what to do with, for 4 charges of gunpowder or a pint of trader's whiskey."
"That was on the Congo River, in Africa, master."
"I believe so. But it does not matter if the young is black. I remember that what they offered were sprightly, woolly-headed, jolly little urchins."
"Unfortunately, we are no longer on the Congo. We are in Paris."
"Well, we can embark from Marseille and be in Africa in 6 weeks.
"That can be done, but I must stay in France on serious business."
"Business?"
sneered the old man, sending forth a peal of shrill laughter, most lugubrious.
"True. I had forgotten that you have political clubs to organize, conspiracies to foster, and, in short, serious business."
And he laughed again, forced and false. Balsamo held his peace, reserving his powers for the storm impending.
"How far has your business advanced?"
he inquired, painfully turning in his chair and fixing his large gray eyes on the pupil.
"I have thrown the first stone,"
he replied, feeling the glance go through him.
"The pool is stirred up. The mud is in agitation. The philosophic sediment."
"Yes, you are going to bring into play your utopias, fogs, and hollow dreams. These idiots dispute about the existence or non-existence of the Almighty, when they might become little gods themselves. Let us hear who are the famous philosophers whom you have enlisted."
"I have already the leading poet and the greatest atheist of the age, who will be coming into France presently, to be made a Freemason in the lodge I am getting up in the old Jesuits' College, Portefaix Street. His name is Voltaire."
"I do not know him. The next?"
"I am to be introduced to the greatest sower of ideas of the century, the author of The Social Contract, Rousseau."
"He is not known to me either."
"I expect not, as you only know such old alchemists as Alfonso the Wise, Raymond Lully, Peter of Toledo, and Albert the Great."
"Because they are the only men who have really loved a life, sowed ideas that live, and labored at the grand question of to be or not to be."
"There are 2 ways of living, master."
"I only know of one, existing. But to return to your brace of philosophers, with their help, you intend to—"
"Grasp the present and sap the future."
"How stupid they must be in this country to be lured away by ideas."
"No, it is because they have too much brains that they are led by ideas. And then I have a more powerful help than all the philosophers. The fact that monarchy has lasted 1600 years in France, and the French are tired of it.
Hence, they are going to overturn the throne, and you are backing them with all your forces. You fool! What good is the upsetting of this monarchy going to do you?
It will bring me nothing at the best, but it will be happiness for others.
Come, come, I am in a good humor today, and can listen to your nonsense. Explain to me how you will obtain the general weal, and what it consists of.
A ministry is in power, which is the last rampart defending the monarchy. It is a cabinet, brave, industrious, and intelligent, which might sustain this worn-out and staggering monarchy for yet 20 years. My aides will overturn it.
Your philosophers?
Oh, no, for they are in favor of the ministry, for its head is a philosopher too.
Then they are a selfish pack. What great imbeciles!
I do not care to discuss what they are, for I do not know,
said Balsamo, who was losing his patience.
I only know that they will all cry down the next ministry when this one is destroyed. This new cabinet will have against it the philosophers and then the parliament. They will make such an uproar that the cabinet will persecute the philosophers and block the parliament. Then in mind and matter will be organized a sullen league, a tenacious, stubborn, restless opposition, which will attack everything, undermining and shaking. Instead of parliament, they will try to rule with judges appointed by the king. They will do everything for their appointer. With reason, they will be accused of venality, corruption, and injustice. The people will rise, and at last, royalty will have arrayed against its philosophy, which is intelligence, parliament, which is the middle class, and the mob, which is the people. In other words, the lever with which Archimedes can raise the world.
Well, when you have lifted it, you will have to let it fall again.
Yes, but when it falls, it will smash the royalty.
To use your figurative language, when this worm-eaten monarchy is broken, what will come out of the ruins?
Freedom.
The French be free? Well, then there will be 30 millions of free men in France.
Yes.
Among them, do you not think there will be one with a bigger brain than another, who will rob them of freedom some fine morning, that he may have a larger share than his proper one for himself? Do you not remember a dog we had at Medina, which used to eat as much as all the rest together?
Yes, and I remember that they all together pitched on him one day and devoured him.
Because they were dogs. Men would have continued to give in to the greediest.
Do you set the instincts of animals above the intelligence of man?
Forsooth, the examples abound by which to prove it. Among the ancients was one Julius Caesar, and among the moderns one Oliver Cromwell, who ate up the Roman
and the English cake, without anybody snatching many crumbs away from them.
Well, supposing such an usurper comes, he must die some day, being mortal. But before dying he must do good to even those whom he oppressed. For he would have changed the nature of the upper classes. Obliged to have some kind of support, he will choose the popular as the strongest. To the equality which abases, he will oppose the kind which elevates. Equality has no fixed watermark, but takes the level of him who makes it. In raising the lowest classes, he will have hallowed a principle unknown before his time. The Revolution will have made the French free. The protectorate of another Caesar or Cromwell will have made them equal.
What a stupid fellow this is,
said Altatus, starting in his chair.
To spend 20 years in bringing up a child, so that he shall come and tell you, who taught him all you knew, men are equal. Before the law, maybe, but before death? How about that? One dies in 3 days, another lives 100 years. Men equals before they have conquered death. Oh, the brute, the triple brute.
Altatus sat back to laugh more freely at Balsamo, who kept his head lowered, gloomy and thoughtful. His instructor took pity on him.
Unhappy sophist that you are. Bear in mind one thing, that men will not be equals until they are immortal. Then they will be gods, and these alone are undying.
Immortal. What a dream,
sighed the mesmerist.
Dream? So is the steam, the electric fluid, all that we are hunting after, and not yet caught. A dream. But we will seize, and they will be realities. Move with me, the dust of ages, and see that man in all times has been seeking what I am engaged upon, under the different titles of the bliss, the best, the perfection. Had they found it, this decrepit world would be fresh and rosy as the morning. Instead, see the dry leaf, the corpse, the carrion heap. Is suffering desirable? The corpse pleasant to look upon? The carrion sweet?
You yourself are saying that nobody has found this water of life?
Observed Balsamo as the old man was interrupted by a dry cough.
I tell you that nobody will find it.
By this rule there would be no discoveries. Do you think discoveries are novelties which are invented? Not so. They are forgotten things coming up anew. Why were the once found things forgotten? Because the inventor's life was too short for him to derive from it all its perfection. 20 times they have nearly consummated the water of life. Chiron would have made Achilles completely immortal, but for the lack of the 3 drops of blood, which you refuse me. In the flaw, death found a passage and entered. I repeat that Chiron was another Altotis, prevented by an Akarat from completing the work which would save all mankind by shielding it from the divine malediction. Well, what have you to say to that?"
"Merely," said Balsamo, visibly shaken, "that you have your work and I mine. Let each accomplish his at his risks and perils, but I will not second yours by a crime."
"A crime? When I ask but 3 drops of blood, 1 child, and you would deluge a country with billions of gallons. Tell me now, who is the cannibal of us 2? You do not answer me."
"My answer is that 3 drops would be nothing if you were sure of success."
"Are you sure? Who would send millions to the scaffold and battlefield? Can you stand up before the Creator and say, 'O Master of Life, in return for 4 millions of slain men, I will warrant the happiness of humanity'?"
"Master, ask for something else," said Balsamo, eluding the point.
"Ha! You do not answer. You cannot answer," taunted Altotis triumphantly.
"You must be mistaken on the efficacy of the means. It is impossible."
"It looks as if you argued with me, disputed, deem me a liar,"
said the old alchemist, rolling with cold anger in his gray eyes under his white brows.
"No, but I am in contact with men and things, and you dwell in a nook, in the pure abstraction of a student. I see the difficulties and have to point them out."
"You would soon overcome such difficulties if you liked or believed."
"I do not believe."
"But do you believe that death is an incontestable thing, invincible and infinite? And when you see a dead body, does not the perspiration come to your brow, and a regret is born in your breast?"
"No regret comes into my breast, because I have familiarized myself to all human miseries, and I esteem life as a little thing. But I say in presence of the corpse, 'Dead, thou who wert mighty as a god, O death, it is thou who reigns sovereignly, and nothing can prevail against thee.'"
Altotis listened in silence, with no other token of impatience than fidgeting with a scalpel in his hands. When his disciple had finished the solemn and doleful phrase, he smiled while looking around, his eyes so burning that no secrets seemed to exist for him, stopped on a nook in the room where a little dog trembled on a handful of straw. It was the last of 3 of a kind, which Balsamo had provided on request of the elder for his experiments.
"Bring that dog to this table,"
said he to Balsamo, who laid the creature on a marble slab. Seeming to foresee its doom, and having probably already been handled by the dissector, the animal shuddered, wriggled, and yelped at contact of the cold stone.
"So you believe in life, since you do in death," squeaked Altotis. "This dog looks live enough, eh?"
"Certainly, as it moves and
whines.
How ugly black dogs are! I should like white ones another time. Howl away, you cur!
said the vivisectionist with his lugubrious laugh.
Howl to convince Grand Signor Akkarat that you live.
He pierced the animal at a certain muscle so that he whimpered instead of barking.
Good. Push the bell of the air pump hither. But stay, I must ask what kind of death you prefer for him. Deem best.
I do not know what you mean. Death is death, master.
Very correct what you say, and I agree with you. Since one kind of death is the same as another, exhaust the air, Akkarat.
Balsamo worked the air pump, and the air in the bell of glass hissed out at the bottom so that the little puppy grew uneasy at the first, looked around, began to sniff, put his paw to the issue till the pain of the pressure made him take it away, and then he fell suffocated, puffed up, and asphyxiated.
Behold, the dog dead of apoplexy,
pronounced the sage.
This is a fine mode, with no long suffering. But you do not seem fully convinced. I suppose you know how well laden I am with resources, and you think I have the method of restoring the respiration.
No, I am not supposing that. The dog is truly not alive.
Never mind. We will make assurance doubly sure by killing the canine twice. Lift off the receiver, Akkarat.
The glass bell was removed, and there lay the victim, never stirring, with eyes shut and heart without a beat.
Take the scalpel and sever the spinal column without cutting the larynx.
I do so, solely because you say it.
And to finish the poor creature in case it be not dead,
said the other with a smile of obstinacy peculiar to the aged. With one incision, Balsamo separated the vertebral column a couple of inches from the brain and opened a yawning gash. The body remained unmoving.
He is an inert animal, I see. Cold, forever without movement, eh? You say nothing prevails against death. No power can restore even the appearance of life, far less life itself, to this carcass.
Only the miracle of heaven.
But heaven does not do such things. Supreme wisdom kills because there is reason or benefit to the act. An assassin said so, and he was quite right. Nature has an interest in the death. Now, what will you say if this dog opens his eyes and looks at you?
It would much astonish me,
said the pupil, smiling.
I am glad to hear that it would do as much as that.
As he drew the dog up to an apparatus which we know as a voltaic pile, he rounded off his words with his false and grating laugh. The pile was composed of a vessel containing strips of metal separated by felt. All were bathed in acidulated water. Out of the cup came the two ends of wire, the poles, to speak technically.
"Which eye shall it open, Akarat?"
inquired the experimentalist.
"The right."
The two extremities were brought together, but parted by a little silk on a neck muscle. In an instant the dog's right eye opened and stared at Balsamo, who could not help recoiling.
"Look out,"
said the infernal jester with his dry laugh.
"Our dead dog is going to bite you."
Indeed, the animal, in spite of its sundered spine, with gaping jaws and tremulous eye, suddenly got upon its four legs and tottered on them. With his hair bristling, Balsamo receded to the door, uncertain whether to flee or remain.
"But we must not frighten you to death in trying to teach you,"
said Altatus. Pushing back the cadaver in the machine, the contact broken, the carcass fell back into immovability.
"You see, that we may arrive at the point I spoke of, my son, and prolong life, since we can annul death."
"Not so, for you have only obtained a semblance of life,"
objected Balsamo.
"In time, we shall make it real. The Roman poets, and they were esteemed prophets, assert that Cassidius revived the dead."
"But one objection. Supposing your elixir perfect and a dog given some, it would live on until it fell into the hands of a dissector who would cut its throat."
"I thought you would take me there,"
chuckled the old wizard, clapping his hands.
"Your elixir will not prevent a chimney falling on a man, a bullet going clear through him, or a horse kicking his skull open."
Altatus eyed the speaker like a fencer watching his antagonist make a lunge which lays him open to defeat.
"No, no, no, and you are a true logician. No, my dear Akarat, such accidents cannot be avoided. The wounds will still be made, but I can stop the vital spirit issuing by the hole. Look!"
Before the other could interfere, he drove the lancet into his arm. The old man had so little blood that it was some time flowing to the cut, but when it came, it was abundantly.
"Great God! You have hurt yourself!"
cried the younger man.
"We must convince you."
Taking up a phial of colorless fluid, he poured a few drops on the wound. Instantly, the liquid congealed, or rather threw out fibers materializing, and soon a plaster of a yellow hue covered in the gash and staunched the flow. Balsamo had never seen collodion, and he gazed in stupefaction at the old sage.
"You are the wisest of men, father."
"At least if I have not dealt death a death blow, I have given him a thrust under which he will find it hard to rise. You see, my son, that the human frame has brittle bones. I will harden and yet supple them like steel. It has blood which, in flowing out, carries life with it. I will stop the flow. The skin and flesh are soft. I will tan them, so that they will turn the edge of steel and blunt the points of spears, while bullets will flatten against it. Only let an Altatus live 300 years. Well, give me what I want, and I shall live 1,000. Oh, my dear Akarat, all depends on you. Bring me the child."
"I will think it over, and do you likewise reflect."
The sage darted a look of withering scorn on his adept.
"Go," he snarled. "I will convince you later. Besides, human blood is not so precious that I cannot use a substitute. Go, and let me seek. I shall find. I have no need of you. Begone."
Balsamo walked over to the elevator, and with a stamp of the foot caused it to carry him down to the other floor. Mute, crushed by the genius of this wizard, he was forced to believe in impossible things by his doing them. End of chapter 41. Recording by jvanstan, Savannah, Georgia. Chapter 42 of Balsamo the Magician by Alexandre Dumas, translated by Henry L. Williams. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The King's New Amour. This same long night had been employed by Countess du Barry in trying to mold the king's mind to a new policy according to her views. Above all, she had dwelt upon the necessity of not letting the Choiseul party win possession of the Dauphiness. The king had answered carelessly that the princess was a girl, and Choiseul an old statesman, so that there was no danger, since one only wanted to sport and the other to labor. Enchanted at what he thought a witticism, he cut short further dry talk. But Jean did not stay stopped, for she fancied the royal lover was thinking of another. He was fickle. His great pleasure was in making his lady-loves jealous, as long as they did not sulk too long or become too riotous in their jealous fits. Jean du Barry was jealous naturally, and from fear of a fall. Her position had cost her too much pains to conquer, and was too far from the starting point for her to tolerate rivals as Lady Pompadour had done. Hence, she wanted to know what was on the royal mind. He answered by these memorable words, of which he did not mean a jot.
"I intend to make my daughter-in-law very happy, and I am afraid that my son will not make her so."
"Why not, sire?"
"Because he looks at other women a good deal, and very seldom at her."
"If any but your majesty said that, I should disbelieve them, for the Archduchess is sweetly pretty."
"She might be rounded out more. That Mademoiselle de Tavernay is the same age, and she has a finer figure. She is perfectly lovely."
Fire flashed in the favorite's eyes and warned the speaker of his blunder.
"Why, I wager that you were plump as Watteau's shepherdesses at 16,
said he quickly, which adulation improved matters a little, but the mischief was done. "Humph," said she, bridling up under the pleased smile. "Is the young lady of the Tavernay family so very, very fair?"
"I only noticed that she was not a bag of bones. You know I am short-sighted, and the general outline alone strikes me. I saw that the newcomer from Austria was not plump, that is all."
"Yes, you must only see generally, for the Austrian is a stylish beauty, and the provincial lady a vulgar one."
"According to this, Jean, you would be the vulgar kind," said the monarch. "You are joking, I think."
"That is a compliment, but it is wrapped up in a compliment to another," thought the favorite, and aloud she said, "Faith, I should like the Dauphiness to choose a bevy of beauties for maids of honor. A court of old tabbies is frightful."
"You are talking over one to your side, for I was saying the same thing to the Dauphin. But he is indifferent."
"However, she begins well, you think, to take this Tavernay girl. She has no money."
"No, but she has blood. The Tavernay Redcastles are a good old house, and long-time servants of the realm."
"Who is backing them? Not the Choiseurs, for they would be overfeasted with pensions in that case."
"I beg you not to bring in politics, Countess."
"Is it bringing in politics to say that the Choiseurs are blood-sucking the realm?"
"Certainly."
And he arose. An hour after he regained the Grand Trianon Palace, happy at having inspired jealousy, though he said to himself, as a Richelieu might do at 30,
"What a bother these jealous women are!"
Dubarry went into her boudoir, where Chon was impatiently waiting for the news.
"You are having fine success," she exclaimed. "Day before yesterday presented to the Dauphiness. You dined at her table yesterday." "That's so. But much good in such nonsense." "Nonsense? When 100 fashionable carriages are racing to bring you courtiers?" "I am vexed. Sorry for them, as they will not have any smiles from me this morning. Let me have my chocolate." "Stormy weather, eh?"
Chon rang, and Zamore came in to get the order. He started off so slowly and humping his back that the mistress cried,
"Is that slow coach going to make me perish of hunger? If he plays the camel and does not hurry, he'll get 100 lashes on his back."
"Me no hurry, me governor," replied the black boy majestically.
"You a governor?"
screamed the lady, flourishing a fancy riding whip kept to maintain order among the spaniels.
"I'll give you a lesson in governing."
But the negro ran out yelling.
"You are quite ferocious, Jean," remarked her sister. "Surely I have the right to be ferocious in my own house." "Certainly, but I am going to elope, for fear I may be devoured alive."
3 knocks on the door came to interrupt the outbreak.
"Hang it all! Who is bothering now?"
cried the Countess, stamping her foot.
"He is in for a nice welcome,"
muttered Chon.
"It will be a good thing if I am badly received,"
said Jean, as he pushed open the door as widely as though he were a king.
"For then I should take myself off and not come again, and you would be the greater loser of the two."
"Saucebox."
"Because I am not a flatterer. What is the matter with the girl this morning, Chon?"
"She is not safe to go near."
"Oh, here comes the chocolate. Good morning, chocolate,"
said the favorite's brother, taking the platter and putting it on a small table at which he seated himself.
"Come and tuck it in, Chon. Those who are too proud won't get any. That's all."
"You are a nice pair," said Jean, "gobbling up the bread and butter, instead of wondering what worries me." "Out of cash, I suppose," said Chon. "Pooh, the king will run out before I do."
"Then lend me 1,000. I can do with it,"
said the man.
"You will get 1,000 Philips on the nose sooner than 1,000 louis." "Is the king going to keep that abominable Choiseul?" questioned Chon. "That is no novelty. You know that they are sticks in the mud." "Has the old boy fallen in love with the Dauphiness?" "You are getting warm. But look at the glutton, ready to burst with swilling chocolate, and will not lift a finger to help me out of my quandary." "You never mean to say the king has another fancy?" cried Chon, clasping her hands and turning pale. "If I did not say so, your brother would, for he will either choke with the chocolate or get it out."
Thus adjured, Jean managed to gasp the name.
"Andrea of Tavernay."
"The Baron's daughter! Oh, mercy!" groaned Chon. "I do not know what keeps me from tearing his eyes out. The lazy bones, to go puffing them up with sleep when our fortunes stagger."
With want of sleep, you mean? Returned Jean. I am sleepy, as I am hungry for the same reason. I have been running about the streets all night.
Just like you.
And all the morning.
You might have run to some purpose, and found out where that intriguing jade is housed.
The very thing. I questioned the driver of the carriage lent to them, and he took them to Coq-Héron Street. They are living in a little house at the back, next door to our Menonville house.
Jean, we are good friends again, said the Countess. Gorge as you like, but we must have all the particulars about her, how she lives, who calls on her, and what she is about. Does she get any love letters? These are important to know.
I have got us started on the right road, anyway, said Jean. Suppose you do a little now.
Well, suggested Jean, there must be rooms to let in that street. Excellent idea, said the Countess. You must be off quickly to the place, Jean, and hire a flat there, where a watcher can mark down all her doings.
No use. There are no rooms to hire there, I inquired. But I can get what we want in the street at the back, overlooking their place, Plastriere Street.
Well, quick, get a room there.
I have done that, answered Jean.
Admirable fellow! Come, let me buss thee, exclaimed the royal favourite. Jean wiped his mouth, received the caress, and made a ceremonious bow to show that he was duly grateful for the honour.
I took the little suite for a young widow. Young widow, you, John.
Capital! It shall be John who will take the lodgings and keep an eye on what goes on. But you must not lose any time. The coach!
cried Dubarry, ringing the bell so loudly that she would have roused all the spellbound servants of the palace of the Sleeping Beauty. The three knew how highly to rate Andrea, for at her first sight she had excited the king's attention, hence she was dangerous.
This girl,
said the Countess, while the carriage was being got ready,
cannot be a true country wench, if she has not made some sweetheart follow her to Paris. Let us hunt up this chap, and get her married to him offhand. Nothing would so piss off the king as rustic lovers getting wedded.
I do not know so much about that,
said Jean.
Let us be distrustful. His most Christian Majesty is greedy for what is another's property.
John departed in the coach, with Jean's promise that he would be her first visitor in the new lodgings. She was in luck, for she had hardly more than taken possession of the rooms and gone to look out of the window commanding a view of the rear gardens, than a young lady came to sit at the summer-house window with embroidery in her hand. It was Andrea. End of chapter 42, recording by jvanstan, Savannah, Georgia. Chapter 43 of Balsamo the Magician by Alexandre Dumas, translated by Henry L. Williams. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Two birds with one stone. John had not been many minutes scanning the Tavernet lady when Viscount Jean, racing up the stairs 4 at a time like a schoolboy, appeared on the threshold of the pretended widow's room.
Hurrah, Jean! I am placed splendidly to see what goes on, but I am unfortunate about hearing.
You ask too much. Oh, I say, I have a bit of news, marvelous and incomparable. These philosophic fellows say a wise man ought to be ready for anything. But I cannot be wise, for this knocked me. I give you 100 chances to guess who I ran up against at a public fountain at the corner. He was sopping a piece of bread in the gush, and it was our philosopher.
Who? Gilbert?
The very boy, with bare head, open waistcoat, stockings ungartered, shoes without buckles. In short, just as he turned out of bed."
"Then he lives by here? Did you speak to him?"
"We recognized one another, and when I thrust out my hand he bolted like a harrier among the crowd, so that I lost sight of him. You don't think I was going to run after him, do you?"
"Hardly. But then you have lost him." "What a pity," said the girl Sylvie, whom Chon had brought along as her maid.
"Yes, certainly," said Jean. "I owe him 100 stripes with a whip, and they would not have spoilt by keeping any longer had I got a grip of his collar. But he guessed my good intentions and fled. No matter, here he is in town, and when one has the ear of the chief of police, anybody can be found."
"Shut him up when you catch him," said Sylvie, "but in a safe place."
"And make you turnkey over him," suggested Jean, winking. "She would like to take him his bread and water."
"Stop your joking, brother," said Chon. "The young fellow saw your row over the post-horses, and he is to be feared if you set him against you."
"How can he live without means?"
"Tut, he will hold horses or run errands."
"Never mind him. Come to our observatory."
Brother and sister approached the window with infinity of precautions. Jean had provided himself with a telescope. Andrea had dropped her needlework, put up her feet in a lower chair, taken a book, and was reading it with some attention, for she remained very still.
"Fie on the studious person,"
sneered John.
"What an admirable one," added Jean. "A perfect being. What arms, what hands, what eyes, lips that would wreck the soul of Saint Anthony. Oh, the divine feet, and what an ankle in that silk hose!"
"Hold your tongue. This is coming on finely," said Chon. "You are smitten with her now? This is the drop that fills the bucket."
"It would not be a bad job if it were so, and she returned me the flame a little. It would save our poor sister a lot of worry."
"Let me have the spyglass a while. Yes, she is very handsome, and she must have had a sweetheart out there in the woods. But she is not reading. See, the book slips out of her hand. I tell you, Jean, that she is in a brown study."
"She sleeps, you mean?"
"Not with her eyes open. What lovely eyes! This is a good glass, Jean. I can almost read in her book."
"What is the book, then?"
John was leaning out a little when she suddenly drew back.
"Gracious! Look at that head sticking out of the garret window."
"Gilbert! By Jove! With what burning eyes he is glaring on the Tavernet girl!"
"I have it. He is the country gallant of his lady. He has had the notice where she was coming to live in Paris, and he has taken a room close to her. A change of dovecote for the turtle doves."
"Sister, we need not trouble now, for he will do all the watching."
"For his own gain."
"No, for ours. Let me pass, as I must go and see the chief of police. By Jupiter, what luck we have! But don't you let Philosopher catch a glimpse of you. He would decamp very quick."
End of chapter 43. Recording by jvanstan, Savannah, Georgia. Chapter 44 of Balsamo the Magician by Alexandre Dumas, translated by Henry L. Williams. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. The plan of action. Sartina had allowed himself to sleep late, as he had managed the multitude very well during the Dauphiness's reception, and he was trying on new wigs at noon as a kind of holiday, when Chevalier Jean du Barry was announced. The minister of police was sure that nothing unpleasant had occurred, as the favorite's brother was smiling.
"What brings you so early?"
"To begin with,"
replied Jean, always ready to flatter those of whom he wanted to make use,
"I am bound to compliment you on the admirable way in which you regulated the processions."
"Is this official?"
"Quite, so far as Lucienne is concerned."
"Is not that ample? Does not the sun rise in that quarter?"
"It goes down there very often, eh?"
and the pair laughed.
"But, the compliments apart, I have a service to ask of you."
"Two, if you like."
"Tell me if anything lost in Paris can be found."
"Yes, whether worthless or very valuable."
"My object of search is not worth much,"
responded Jean, shaking his head.
"Only a young fellow of 18, named Gilbert, who was in the service of the Tavernets in Lorraine, but was picked up on the road by my sister John. She took him to Lucienne, where he abused the hospitality."
"Stole something?"
"I do not say so, but he took flight in a suspicious manner."
"Have you any clue to his hiding place?"
"I met him at the fountain at the corner of Plastriere Street, where I suppose he is living, and I believe I could lay my hand on the very house."
"All right. I will send a shore agent. Who will take him out of it?"
"The fact is, this is a special affair, and I should like you to manage it without a third party."
"Oh, in that case, let me pick out a becoming wig, and I am with you."
"I have a carriage below."
"Thank you. I prefer my own. It gets a new coat of paint every month, so as not to betray me."
He had tried on his 20th peruke when the carriage was waiting at the door.
"There it is, the dirty house,"
said Jean, pointing in the direction of a dwelling in Plastriere Street.
"Ooh," said Sartina. "Dash me if I did not suspect this. You are unlucky, for that is the dwelling of Rousseau of Geneva."
"The scribbler? What does that matter?"
"It matters that Rousseau is a man to be dreaded."
"Pooh! It is not likely my little man will be harbored by a celebrity."
"Why not? As you nicknamed him a philosopher. Birds of a feather, you know."
"Suppose it is so. Why not put this Rousseau in the Bastille if he is in our way?"
"Well, he would be more in our way there than here. You see, the mob likes to throw stones at him, but they would pelt us if he was no longer their target, and they want him for themselves. But let us see into this. Sit back in the carriage."
He referred to a notebook.
"I have it. If your young blade is with Rousseau, when would he have met him?"
"Say, on the 16th instant."
"Good. He returned from botanizing in Moidon Wood on the 17th with a youth, and this stranger stayed all night under his roof. You are crossed by luck. Give it up, or you would have all the philosophers against us in riot."
"Oh, Lord! What will Sister Jean say?"
"Oh, does the Countess want the lad? Why not coax him out, and then we would nab him. Anywhere, not inside Rousseau's house."
"You might as well coax a hyena."
I doubt it is so difficult. All you want is a go-between. Let me see. A prince will not do. Better one of these writers, a poet, a philosopher, or a Bota. Stay, I have him. Gilbert? Yes, through a botanist friend of Rousseau's. You know Jussieu? Yes, for the Countess lets him prowl in her gardens and rifle them. I begin to believe that you shall have your Gilbert without any noise. Rousseau will hand him over, pinioned, so to say. So you go on making a trap for philosophers, according to a plan I will give you, on vacant ground out Meudon or Marley way. Now, let us be off, as the passengers are beginning to stare at us. Home, coachman!
End of chapter 44. Recording by jvanstan, Savannah, Georgia. Chapter 45 of Balsamo the Magician by Alexandre Dumas, translated by Henry L. Williams. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Too good a teacher. Fatigued by the ceremonies of the Dauphine's nuptials, and particularly by the dinner, which was too stately, the king retired at 9 o'clock and dismissed all attendants except Duke Vauguyon, tutor of the royal children. As he was losing his best pupil by the marriage, having only his 2 brothers to teach, and as it is the custom to reward a preceptor when education of a charge is complete, he expected a recompense. He had been sobbing, and now he slipped out a pocket handkerchief and began to weep.
"Come, my poor Vauguyon,"
said the king, pointing to a footstool in the light while he would be in the shade.
"Pray, be seated without any to do."
The duke sighed.
"The education is over, and you have turned out in the Prince Royal the best educated prince in Europe."
"I believe he is."
"Good at history, at geography, and at wood-turning."
"The praise for that goes to another, sire."
"And at setting timepieces in order. Before he handled them, my clocks told the time one after another, like wheels of a coach. But he has put them right. In short, the heir to the crown will, I believe, be a good king, a good manager, and a good father of family. I suppose he will be a good father," he insisted.
"Why, your Majesty," said Vauguyon simply, "I consider that, as the Dauphin has all the germs of good in his bosom, those that constitute that are in the cluster."
"Come, come, my lord," said the sovereign, "let us speak plainly. As you know the Dauphin thoroughly, you must know all about his tastes and his passions."
"Pardon me, sire, but I have extirpated all his passions."
"Confound it all! This is just what I feared!"
exclaimed Louis XV, with an energy which made the hearer's wig stand its hairs on end. "Sire, the Duke of Berry has lived under your august roof with the innocence of the studious youth."
"But the youth is now a married man."
"Sire, as the guide of—"
"Yes, well, I see that you must guide him to the very last."
"Please, your Majesty."
"This is the way of it. You will go to the Dauphin, who is now receiving the final compliments of the gentlemen as the Dauphiness is receiving those of the ladies. Get a candle, take your pupil aside, show him the nuptial chamber which is at the end of a corridor filled with pictures which I have selected as a complete course of the instruction which your lordship omitted."
"Ah," said the duke, starting at the smile of his master, which would have appeared cynical on any mouth but his, the wittiest in the kingdom.
"At the end of the new corridor, I say, of which here is the key."
Vauguyon took it, trembling.
"You will shake your pupil's hand, put the candle into it, wish him good night, and tell him that it will take 20 minutes to reach the bedroom door, giving a minute to each painting."
I understand."
That is a good thing."
"Your Majesty is good enough to excuse me."
"I suppose I shall have to, but you were making this end prettily for my family."
From the window the king could see the candle which passed from the hands of Vauguyon into that of his guileless pupil go the way up the new gallery and flicker out.
"I gave him 20 minutes. I myself found 5 long enough," muttered the king. "Alas, will they say of the Dauphin as of the second Racine, he is the nephew of his grandfather."
End of chapter 45. Recording by jvanstan, Savannah, Georgia. Chapter 46 of Balsamo the Magician by Alexandre Dumas, translated by Henry L. Williams. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. A terrible wedding night. The Dauphin opened the door of the anteroom before the wedding chamber. The Archduchess was waiting in a long white wrapper with the strange anticipation on her brow, along with the sweet expectation of the bride of some disaster. She seemed menaced with one of those terrors which nervous dispositions foresee and support sometimes with more bravery than if not awaited. Lady Noailles was seated by the gilded couch which easily held the princess's frail and dainty body. The maids of honor stood at the back, waiting for the mistress of the attendants to make them the sign to withdraw. These were all ignorant that the Dauphin was coming by a new way in. As the corridor was empty and the door at the end ajar, he could see and hear what went on in the room. "In what direction does my lord the Dauphin come?" inquired the Austrian's pure and harmonious voice, though slightly tremulous. "Yonder," replied Lady Noailles, pointing just the wrong way. "What is that noise outside? Not unlike the roaring of angry waters." "It is the tumult of the innumerable sightseers walking about under the illumination and waiting for the fireworks display." "The illuminations," said the princess with a sad smile. "They must have been timely this evening, for did you not notice it was very black weather?" At this moment the Dauphin, who was tired of waiting, thrust his head in at the door and asked if he might enter. Lady Noailles screamed, for she did not recognize the intruder at first. The Dauphiness, worked up into a nervous state by the incidents of the day, seized the duchess's arm in her fright. "It is I, madame. Have no fear," called out the prince. "But why by that way?" said Lady Noailles.
"Because,"
explained Louis the King, showing his head at the half-open door,
"because the Duke of Vauguyon knows so much Latin, mathematics, and geography as to leave room for nothing else."
In presence of the king so untimely arrived, the Dauphiness slipped off the couch and stood up in the wrapper, clothed from head to foot like a Vestal Virgin in her stole.
"Anyone can see that she is thin,"
muttered the king.
"What the deuce made Choiseul pick out the skinny chicken among all the poulets of European courts?"
"Your Majesty will please to observe that I acted according to the strict etiquette,"
said the Duchess of Noailles.
"The infraction was on my lord the Dauphin's part."
"I take it on myself, so let us leave the children to themselves," said the monarch.
The princess seized the lady's arm with more terror than before.
"Oh, don't go away," she faltered. "I shall die of shame." "Sire, the Dauphiness begs to be allowed to go to rest without any state,"
said Lady Noailles.
"The deuce! And does Lady Etiquette herself crave that?"
"Look at the Archduchess."
In fact, Marie Antoinette, standing up, pale and with her rigid arm sustaining her by a chair, resembled a statue of fright, but for the slight chattering of her teeth and the cold perspiration bedewing her forehead.
"Oh, I should not think of causing the young lady any pain,"
said Louis XV, as little strict about forms as his father was the other thing.
Let us retire, Duchess. Besides, the doors have locks."
The Dauphin blushed to hear these words of his grandfather, but the lady, though hearing, had not understood. King Louis XV embraced his granddaughter-in-law and went forth with Lady Noailles, laughing mockingly and sadly for those who did not share his merriment. The other persons had gone out by the other door. The wedded pair were left alone in silence. At last, the young husband approached his bride with bosom beating rapidly. To his temples, breast, and wrist he felt all his repressed blood rushing hotly, but he guessed that his grandfather was behind the door, and the cynical glance still chilled the Dauphin, very timid and awkward by nature.
"You are not well, madame," he stammered. "You are very pale, and I think you are trembling." "I cannot conceal that I am under a spell of agitation. There must be some terrible storm overhead, for I am peculiarly affected by thunderstorms."
Indeed, she shook by spasms as though affected by electrical shocks. At this time, as though to justify her assertion, a furious gust of wind, such as shear the tops off mountains and heap up half the sea against the other, the first whoop of the coming tempest, filled the palace with tumult, anguish, and many a creaking. Leaves were swept off the branches off the boughs and from the trees. A long and immense clamor was drawn from the 100,000 spectators in the gardens. A lugubrious and endless bellowing ran through the corridors and galleries, composing the most awful notes that had ever vibrated in human ears. Then an ominous rattling and jingling succeeded the roar. It was the fall of countless shivers of glass out of the window panes on the marble slabs and cornices. At the same time, the gale had opened one of the shutters and banged it to and fro like the wings of a bird of night. Wherever the window had been open and where the glass was shivered, the lights were put out. The prince went over to the window to fasten the broken shutter, but his wife held him back.
"Oh, pray, do not open that window, for the lights will be blown out and I should die of fright."
He stopped. Through the casement beyond the curtain which he had drawn, the tree-tops of the park were visible, swayed from side to side as if some unseen giant were waving them by the stems. All the illuminations were extinguished. Then could be seen on the dark sky still blacker clouds coming on with a rolling motion like troops of cavalry wrapped in dust. The pallid prince stood with one hand on the sash-handle. The bride sank on a chair with a sigh.
"You are very much alarmed, madame." "Yes, though your presence supports me. Oh, what a storm! All the pretty lights are put out." "Yes, it is a southwest wind, always the worst for storms. If it holds out, I do not know how they will be able to set off the fireworks." "What would be the use of them? Everybody will be out of the gardens in such weather." "You do not know what our French are when there is a show. They cry for the pyrotechnics, and this is to be superb. The pyrotechnist showed me the sketches. There, look at the first rockets." Indeed, brilliant as long, fiery serpents, the trial rockets rushed up into the clouds, but at the same time, as if the storm had taken the flash as a challenge, one stroke of lightning seeming to split the sky snaked among the rockets ascending and eclipsed their red glare with its bluish flaring. "Verily, it is impiety for man to contest with God,"
said the Archduchess. The trial rockets had preceded the general display by but a few minutes, as the pyrotechnist felt the need of hastening, and the first set pieces were fired and were hailed with a cheer of delight. But as though they were really a war between man and heaven, the storm, irritated by the impiety, drowned with its thunder the cheers of the mobs, and all the cataracts on high opened at once. Torrents of rain were precipitated from the cloudy heights. In like manner to the wind putting out the illuminations, the rain put out the fireworks.
"What a misfortune! The fireworks are spoilt," said the Dauphin. "Alas, everything goes wrong since I entered France,"
said Marie Antoinette.
This storm suits the feast that was given me. It was wanted to hide from the people the miseries of this dilapidated palace of Versailles. So, blow, you southwest wind, spout, rain, pile yourselves together, tempestuous clouds, to hide from my eyes the paltry, tawdry reception given to the daughter of the Kaisers when she laid her hand in that of the future king."
The visibly embarrassed Dauphine did not know what answer to make to these reproaches, and particularly this exalted melancholy so far from his character. He only sighed.
"I afflict you," continued she, "but do not believe that my pride is speaking. No, no, it is no wise in it. Would that they had only shown me the pretty little Trianon, with its flower gardens and smiling shades. The rain will but refresh it, the wind but open the blossoms. That charming nest would content me. But these ruins frighten me, so repugnant to my youth, and yet how many more ruins will be created by this frightful storm."
A fresh gust, worse than the first, shook the palace. The princess started up aghast.
"Oh, heavens! Tell me that there is no danger," she moaned. "I shall die of fright." "There is no fear, madame. Versailles is built on terraces so as to defy the storm. If lightning fell, it would only strike yonder chapel with its sharp roof, or the little tower which has turrets. You know that peaks attract the electric fluid and flat surfaces repel them."
He took her frozen yet palpitating hand. Just then a vivid flash inundated the room with its violet and livid glare. She uttered a scream and repulsed her husband.
"Oh, you looked in the lurid gleam like a phantom, pale, headless, and bleeding." "It is the mirage caused by the sulphur," said the prince. "I will explain."
But a deafening peal of thunder cut short the sentence of the phlegmatic prince lecturing the royal spouse.
"Come, come, madame, let us leave such fears to the common people. Physical agitation is one of the conditions of nature. A storm, and this is no more, is one of the most frequent and natural phenomena. I do not know why people are surprised at them." "I should not quail so much at another time, but for a storm to burst on our wedding night, another awful forewarning joined to those heralding my entry into France. My mother has told me that this century is fraught with horrors, as the heavens above are charged with fire and destruction." "Madame, no dangers can menace the throne to which we shall ascend, for we royalties dwell above the common plain. The thunder is at our feet, and we wield the bolts." "Alas, something dreadful was predicted me, or rather, shown to me in a dish of water. It is hard to describe what was utterly novel to me. A machine, reared on high, like a scaffold, two upright beams, between which glided an axe of odd shape. I saw my head beneath this blade. It descended, and my head, severed from the body, leapt to the earth. This is what I was shown." "Pure hallucination," said the scoffer. "There is no such an instrument in existence, so be encouraged." "Alas, I cannot drive away the odious thought." "You will succeed, Marie," said the Dauphine, drawing nearer. "Beside you will be an affectionate and assiduously protective husband." At the instant when the husband's lips nearly touched the wife's cheek, the picture gallery door opened again, and the curious, covetous look of King Louis XV penetrated the place. But simultaneously, a crash of which no words can give an idea resounded through the palace. A spout of white flame, streaked with green, dashed past the window, but shivered a statue on the balcony. Then, after a prodigious ripping and splitting sound, it bounded upward and vanished like a meteor.
Out went the candles. The Dauphine staggered back, dazed and frightened to the very wall. The Dauphiness fell, half swooned on the step of her praying desk, and dwelt in deadly torpor. Believing the earth was quaking under him, Louis XV regained his rooms, followed by his faithful valet. In the morning, Versailles was not recognizable. The ground had drunk up the deluge, and the trees absorbed the sulphur. Everywhere was mud, and the broken boughs dragging their blackened lengths like scorched serpents. Louis XV went to the bridal chamber for the third time and looked in. He shuddered to see at the praying stand the bride, pale and prone, with the aurora tinging her spotless robe like a Magdalene of Rubens. On a chair, with his velvet slippers in a puddle of water, the Dauphine of France sat as pale as his wife, and with the same air of having faced a nightmare. The nuptial bed was untouched. Louis XV frowned. A never-before-experienced pain ran through his brow, cooled by egotism even when debauchery tried to heat it. He shook his head, sighed, and returned to his apartments, full of grim forebodings over the future which this tragic event had marked on its brow. What dread and mysterious incidents were enfolded in its bosom, it will be our mission to disclose in the sequel to this book, entitled The Mesmerist's Victim. End of chapter 46, recording by jvanstan, Savannah, Georgia. End of the first volume of the Marie Antoinette Romances, Balsamo the Magician, by Alexandre Dumas, translated by Henry L. Williams. Thank you for listening.